Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was the true nine-tailed SSS-Rank Godslayer adventurer of Orario. The sage beyond the dungeon and fall in love with Hestia and Freya DanMachi. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. The sage emerges from shadow. The dungeon breathed. Not metaphorically. Naruto had long since abandoned the comfort of metaphor when it came to this place. The stone walls surrounding him contracted and expanded with rhythmic precision, accompanied by a sound like wind through a massive throat. 7 years of descent had taught him to read the dungeon's moods, the petulant trembling before a monster Rex spawned, the almost curious stillness when he demonstrated a new technique, the hungry anticipation when his blood hit the floor. Today, the dungeon felt almost mournful. Naruto stood on the 100th floor, a designation that would mean nothing to the surface world, who believed the charted depths ended at 58. His hand rested against a wall of crystalline stone that pulsed with bioluminescent veins, casting his shadow in shifting patterns of blue and violet. The whisker marks on his cheeks seemed darker here, that was simply the interplay of light against fatigue he'd carried so long it felt like a second skeleton. So that's it then, he said aloud, voice roughened from disuse. The dungeon had no response, or rather, its response was the same as always. A feeling more than sound, a pressure against his consciousness that might have been words in a language that predated language itself. Stay, descend, discover, once. That call had been irresistible. The mystery of this place, the promise of answers about why he'd awakened 7 years ago in Orario's outskirts with fragmented memories and power that shouldn't exist, it had pulled him downward like gravity. Each floor promised revelation, each monster defeated felt like progress toward understanding. But the 100th floor had been empty. Why save for ruins of a civilization that had no name in any history he'd found? And Naruto had realized, with the peculiar clarity of absolute isolation, that he'd been running toward answers to avoid. Asking a simpler question. What was the point of understanding if there was no one to share it with? He turned from the wall. His body moved through the dungeon's deeper levels with unconscious effort. Born of intimate familiarity. A sidestep to avoid the ceiling depression that dripped paralytic acid, a hop over the floor section that would trigger a pitfall trap, a casual hand seal that dism. His presence from the sensory awareness of the worm-like creature coiled in the adjacent chamber. Ascending was faster than descending had been. 7 years ago, each floor had demanded his full attention. Every monster a puzzle to solve, every environmental hazard a learning experience painted in his own blood. Now his feet knew the path. His sensory abilities, that constant low-level awareness that felt like a sphere of attention extending from his body, catalogued threats and dismissed them as irrelevant without conscious thought. Floor 90, 85, 73. The dungeon's architecture shifted as he rose. The organic, almost intestinal passages of the deep floors gave way to worked stone corridors with intentional design. Monster encounters became more frequent but deadly. Creatures that had once pushed him to his limits now fell to distracted strikes. On floor 64, a shadow grim materialized behind him, its blade-like forelimbs whistling through the air where his neck had been. Naruto didn't break stride. A shadow clone flickered into existence, intercepted the strike with a kunai that hadn't existed a moment before, and drove a Rasengan into the creature's center mass before dispelling. The monster's death shriek echoed down corridors Naruto had already left behind. Floor 50, his safe zone. The chamber he'd claimed years ago had once been a natural cavern. Roughly circular with a ceiling lost to darkness. Now it bore signs of habitation. A bedroll that had seen better days, storage seals painted on the walls containing supplies, small collection of books salvaged from various ruins. A stream cut through one corner, part of the dungeon's inexplicable but consistent hydrological system. He'd established a small garden there, remnants with surface plants to see what would survive this deep. Most had died. A few had thrived in ways that probably violated several natural laws. He didn't stop. The safe zone felt like a cell now, and he'd already decided to leave it behind. The upper floors blurred together. His body had settled into the ground-eating pace of the experienced delver, that sustainable rhythm that could maintain for hours. His mind, freed from navigation, wandered. 7 years. He'd been 18 when he'd awakened in that field outside Orario, head splitting with pain, memories fragmented like a shattered mirror. Some pieces had been clear. His name, the fundamentals of his abilities, flashes of faces he thought might be precious to him. Others remained dark. Sometimes he dreamed of a different world, orange jumpsuits and headbands and a blonde woman with purple diamonds on her forehead, but whether those were memories or his mind filling gaps with fantasy, he couldn't say. What he'd known with certainty was that the tower in the distance called to him. Babel, and beneath it, the dungeon. The early days had been chaotic. He'd tried integrating into Orario proper, but his appearance and abilities had drawn attention he wasn't equipped to handle. No familia, no status, no money, just power that confused and frightened those who witnessed it. The guild had attempted to conscript him. IOUS familias had tried recruiting with promises that felt hollow. So he'd gone down into the dungeon that called to him with a voice he felt in his marrow. And he'd kept going down, chasing the whisper that promised understanding. Until understanding had stopped mattering. Floor 30, 20, 15. The dungeon's character shifted again. These levels teemed with adventurers, mostly lower ranked parties moving with the careful coordination of those aware they stood at the edge of their capabilities. Naruto avoided them, not difficult when his sensory abilities could track their positions from hundreds of meters away. And his mobility let him use paths they'd consider impossible. Still, fragments of conversation reached him. Heard there's been strange activity on the 18th. Loki Familia cleared to the 52nd yesterday, new record. If I can just get one more goblin core, I'll have enough for mundane concerns, daily struggles, the verbal proof of lives interconnected with others, of goals that mattered because someone else would celebrate or commiserate. Naruto felt their voices like a physical ache. The entrance to the first floor appeared ahead, that massive descending staircase worn smooth by countless feet, widening toward the surface like an inverted throat. Natural light, filtered and weakened by Babel's interior, nonetheless seemed blinding after the bioluminescence below. Naruto paused at the threshold. His reflection caught in a puddle of water, blonde hair longer than he remembered, hanging past his shoulders in a matted tangle, stubble crossing his jaw. The red cloak he'd commissioned years ago now tattered and stained. He looked like what he was, a man who'd spent 7 years in Hell's basement. The whisker marks on his cheeks stood out starkly. Birthmarks, he'd assumed, though they tingled when he drew on the power he thought of as the Nine Tails, that vast reserve of energy that felt simultaneously part of him and other. A presence coiled behind his navel that occasionally whispered in a voice too deep for sound. He stepped onto the staircase. The Babel first floor bustled with activity despite the afternoon hour. Venturers clustered in groups, some preparing to descend, others returning with the glazed relief of survival. Supporters hauled bags of loot toward the exchange. Guild employees moved through the crowd with practiced efficiency. The noise hit Naruto like a physical force. 7 years of silence broken by monster shrieks and the dungeon's breathing had not prepared him for the sheer volume of humanity. Conversations overlapped into a wall of sound that his sensory abilities automatically parsed. 30,000 Valis for a decent shortsword, highway robbery. She totally likes you, just ask her. If Boars hadn't pulled me back, that Minotaur would've. Guilds posting new safety regulations again. He wove through the crowd, drawing stares. Understandable. He probably looked what happened when a vagrant discovered extreme violence. A few hands drifted toward weapons. More reached for their companions, pulling friends away from his path. Naruto kept his body language deliberately non-threatening. Hands visible, movements slow, eyes forward. The last thing he wanted was a confrontation. He was tired, so deeply tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. The guild headquarters occupied a massive structure adjacent to Babel, all white stone and architectural grandeur meant to project authority. Naruto had been here exactly twice, once when he'd first arrived in Orario seeking information, once 3 years ago when he'd registered officially as an adventurer to access certain guild resources. The interior was controlled chaos. Lines of NTURERS queued before service windows staffed by receptionists of various races, human, elf, animal person, all wearing the guild's professional attire. The air smelled of paper, ink, stress sweat, and the particular metallic tang that clung to those who'd recently killed. Naruto joined the shortest line, ignoring the immediate whispers from those who noticed him. His sensory abilities tracked at least a dozen conversations speculating about his identity. The line advanced slowly. He occupied himself by reading the notice board visible from his position, requests for escorts, warnings about monster activity, advertisements for smiths and item shops. The mundanity of it felt surreal. Next, the voice was professionally cheerful with an undercurrent of exhaustion. Naruto approached the window. The half-elf receptionist looked up from her paperwork, and her green eyes went wide. She was young, early 20s perhaps, with pointed ears emerging from emerald haircut in a professional style. Her guild uniform was immaculate despite the late hour. A nameplate identified her as Aina Tool. "Hello," Naruto said, offering what he hoped was a reassuring smile. "I need to update my status registration. It's been a while." Aina's professionalism warred visibly with surprise. Yes, of course. Name, Naruto Uzumaki." Her hands moved through files with practiced efficiency, though he noticed they trembled slightly. "Could you spell the family name?" "Uzumaki. Typing sounds. Then silence. Aina's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, concern, and finally landing on carefully controlled professionalism. "Mr. Uzumaki," she said carefully, "our records indicate you registered 3 years ago but never joined a familia or underwent a status update. You were advised that exploring the dungeon without a proper fauna and familia support is extremely dangerous and violates guild recommendations." "I'm aware." He kept his tone mild. "I'd like to process that status update now." You've been in the dungeon for 3 years without." Aina stopped, visibly collecting herself. "Sir, without a fauna, you don't have a status to update. The process requires a divine blessing." This was the complicated part. Naruto had known it would be. "Could you check my initial registration notes?" he asked. "There should be something there." More typing. Aina's eyes scanned text he couldn't see, and her expression shifted to naked confusion. "This says you demonstrated what appeared to be a status effect despite claiming no divine blessing. You were classified as a special case pending investigation, but there's no follow-up documentation." "Right, so here's the thing." Naruto pulled off his tattered cloak, then turned and lifted his shirt, revealing his back. Aina's gasp was audible even over the ambient noise. His back bore what looked like a fauna, the sacred text that marked a god's blessing. Except the characters were wrong. Where divine script should display stats and abilities in the standardized format every adventurer knew, Naruto's back showed something else entirely. The text seemed to shift when viewed directly. Characters from no language Orario recognized, arranged in patterns that hurt to focus on. And the content. "That's impossible," Aina whispered. She'd stood without realizing it, leaning across the counter. "Those numbers can't be right. Is this a tattoo? Some kind of forgery?" "It's real." Naruto lowered his shirt, turning back to face her. "And it's changed since I was last here. That's what I need documented." Aina sat heavily. Her professional mask had cracked, revealing the concerned academic underneath. "Mr. Uzumaki, I need to be clear. If this is genuine, and those statistics are accurate, you're..." She paused, calculating. "The levels alone would place you beyond any adventurer currently active. The skill listings don't match known ability categories. And the developmental abilities section appears to be in a numeric system I don't recognize." "I know it's irregular," Naruto said quietly. "Irregular." Aina's voice pitched higher before she controlled it, glancing around to ensure they hadn't drawn more attention. "Sir, this is unprecedented. I need to consult with my supervisor. Please wait here." She disappeared through a door behind the service windows. Naruto leaned against the counter, feeling the weight of stairs on his back. His sensory abilities picked up fragmented whispers. "What's going on with that guy?" Aina looked like she saw a ghost. Probably another nutjob claiming to be. 10 minutes passed. 15. The line behind where Naruto had been standing was redirected to other windows, creating a bubble of space around him that felt like quarantine. When Aina returned, she was accompanied by an older human man whose guild uniform bore insignia suggesting seniority. His expression was carefully neutral, but Naruto could sense elevated heart rate. Increased blood pressure. Biological markers of stress. Mr. Uzumaki, the man said, voice gravelly with age, I'm Supervisor Vargas. Miss Toole has shared some concerning information. Before we proceed, I need to ask, are you currently experiencing any mental instability, hallucinations, or compulsions you can't explain? Naruto blinked. You think I'm crazy? The dungeon affects people, Vargas said carefully. Extended solo exploration without support has been known to cause psychological breaks. If you're experiencing difficulties, the guild has resources to help. It was kindly meant. Naruto appreciated that, even as frustration simmered. I'm not having a breakdown. I've genuinely been exploring the deep floors for 3 years. Before that, I spent 4 years going even deeper. What's on my back is real, and I need it documented. Vargas exchanged glances with Aina. Son, the deepest floors currently charted are the 50s, and those are only accessible to the strongest familias. If you've genuinely been solo in the dungeon for years, you wouldn't look this healthy. I established safe zones, learned the patterns. The dungeon and I have an understanding. That was perhaps too honest. Both guild employees' expressions shifted toward alarm. An understanding, Aina repeated slowly. With the dungeon, Naruto sighed. This was going poorly. Look, can you just document what's on my back? Take an impression or whatever the standard process is. If you think I'm delusional, fine, but at least make the official record. Vargas studied him for a long moment. You seem lucid, eccentric perhaps, but coherent. And if nothing else, that marking on your back deserves documentation. He gestured toward the back offices. Come with us. We'll use a private examination room. The room they led him to was small and clinical. White walls, a desk, several chairs, and a device Naruto didn't recognize that looked like a printing press mated with a magnifying glass. Aina operated it while Naruto once again exposed his back. The process involved pressing treated paper against his skin and channeling some kind of energy through the device. Aina worked with focused precision, though he noticed her hands still shook slightly. When she pulled the impression away, the paper had captured his status in perfect detail. All three of them stared at it. Naruto Uzumaki, level 10+, strength, SSS 1589, endurance, SSS 1643, dexterity, SSS 1421, agility, SSS 1556, magic, SSS 2103, magic, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu manifestation magic, creates tangible duplicates sharing user's consciousness. No known upper limit. Magic cost increases per clone. Rasengan convergence magic. Concentrates rotational force into spherical attack. Multiple variations developed. Senjutsu transformation magic. Channels natural energy to enhance all parameters. Requires stillness to initiate. Skills. Sage's perception, sensory ability extending 500+ meters. Detects life force, intent, spatial distortions. Kurama's blessing, connection to unknown entity. Grants emergency power reserve. Dungeon resonance, unique. User can perceive dungeon's intent. Effect unknown. Developmental abilities. Hunter. S. Abnormal resistance. S. Spirit healing. A. Mystery. This is impossible, Vargas whispered. He'd gone pale. The say numbers exceed the theoretical maximum for a level 10 adventurer. The magic section alone. Most blessed individuals have 1 or 2 spells at most. And these skills, Aina was reading with the intensity of someone encountering a fascinating book. Dungeon resonance. I've never seen that ability listed. And, Kurama's blessing, suggests a divine connection, but you claimed no god gave you a fauna. No god that I met. Naruto clarified. When I woke up in Orario 7 years ago, this was already on my back. It's grown with me as I explored. That's not how the fauna works, Aina said automatically, then stopped herself. Except evidently it is, for you. Vargas sat heavily. Son, do you understand what this means? If this information becomes public, every familia in Orario will be hunting you, some to recruit you. Others to eliminate a potential threat. The guild itself may try to conscript you for public safety. Which is why I'm hoping we can keep this quiet, Naruto said. I didn't come here to cause trouble. I just need the documentation for personal records. Why? Aina asked. If you've been operating independently for 7 years, why register now? Naruto met her eyes. Because I'm done being alone. I'm going to start actually living in Orario, which means eventually this will come out. I'd rather have official guild records establishing I've been cooperative from the start. Silence stretched. Vargas and Aina communicated through glances. In that way colleagues developed over years of partnership. Finally, Vargas spoke. We'll document this and seal the records. They'll be accessible only to guild leadership and yourself. Officially, you'll be listed as an active adventurer without familia affiliation. We won't publish your level or capabilities. And unofficially? Naruto asked. Unofficially, I'm going to recommend you join a familia as soon as possible. The protections that provides, both legal and practical, will be invaluable. Vargas stood, offering his hand. Welcome to Orario's official registry, Mr. Uzumaki. Try not to break our city. Naruto shook his hand, appreciating the firm grip. I'll do my best. The sun was setting when Naruto finally left guild headquarters, casting Orario in shades of amber and rose. The city sprawled before him in all directions from Babel's central position, a maze of streets and buildings housing hundreds of thousands of souls. All living their interconnected lives. He'd spent 7 years beneath this. 7 years in darkness and silence, pursuing a mystery that had no answer he could find. The realization of wasted time should have hurt more, but Naruto had already processed that grief during his ascent. What remained was something fragile and unfamiliar. Hope. His stomach growled, reminding him he'd last eaten yesterday. Time was slippery in the deep dungeon. Finding food seemed like a good starting point for rejoining civilization. Orario's streets bustled with evening activity. Street vendors called out their wares. Restaurants released mouth-watering aromas. Adventurers and civilians alike moved with purposeful direction or aimless wandering. Naruto drifted through it all, overwhelmed by sensory input in a way combat never managed. A particular smell caught his attention. Fried potatoes, some kind of meat, spices he didn't recognize. His feet followed his nose southeast to a street vendor's cart where a middle-aged man with an impressive mustache worked a griddle with practiced efficiency. What'll it be, friend? The vendor asked cheerfully. Naruto studied the menu board. The prices seemed reasonable, though his sense of Orario's economy was 7 years out of date. What's good? Everything's good, but the Jagamarukan's my specialty. Fried potato dumpling with your choice of filling. Popular with the locals. I'll take 2. Surprise me on the filling. While the vendor prepared his order, Naruto became aware of another presence approaching the cart. Someone whose biological markers suggested excitement and perpetual motion even while standing still. He glanced over and immediately understood why. The young woman barely came up to his shoulder. With dark hair tied in twin tails and bright blue eyes that sparkled with enthusiasm. Her outfit was distinctive. A white dress with a blue ribbon, though what really caught attention was its Precario's architectural defiance of physics in the chest area. She bounced on her toes while waiting, radiating barely contained energy. 2 Jagamaru-kun, please, she chirped to the vendor. Extra filling if you can manage it. Coming right up, Lady Hestia, the vendor replied with the warmth of familiar custom. Hestia, the name tickled something in Naruto's memory, maybe a mention in one of the books. He'd read about Orario's divine residence. Gods and goddesses walked the city, he knew that much, living among mortals in some kind of cosmic game whose rules he'd never fully understood. The vendor handed over Naruto's order. He paid and took the offered food, biting into the first dumpling without preamble. Flavor exploded across his tongue. Rich, savory, with a perfect contrast between crispy exterior and fluffy interior. He made an involuntary sound of appreciation. Right, Hestia said, grinning at him. Best Jagamaru-kun in Orario. I come here at least 3 times a week. I can see why. Naruto managed around his mouthful. Then remembered basic courtesy and swallowed. Sorry, it's been a while since I had real food. Rough dungeon trip, she asked sympathetically. Something like that. Hestia received her order and paid with coins she counted carefully from a small purse, in the way of someone budgeting strictly. The vendor waved her off when she came up slightly short. Pay me next time, Lady Hestia. You're the best. She clutched her food happily, then turned to Naruto. I haven't seen you around before. New to Orario. New to the surface, Naruto said, surprising himself with the honesty. Been underground for a while. Her eyes widened. You're an adventurer. What familia? None currently. Really? Her entire demeanor shifted, taking on a quality he couldn't quite identify. So you're looking for a goddess? Naruto blinked. I hadn't thought that far ahead, honestly. Well, Hestia drew herself up to her full, limited height. I'm Hestia, goddess of the hearth. I'm currently recruiting for my familia, and you seem nice, so how about it? Want to join? There was something endearing about her directness, the complete lack of artifice in the offer. No sales pitch about benefits or power, just an invitation based on him seeming nice. I appreciate the offer, Naruto said carefully, but I should probably figure out what I'm doing before making commitments. Hestia's expression fell into exaggerated disappointment. Ah, I was so close. Story of my life. All the good ones are either taken or undecided. She sighed dramatically, then brightened just as quickly. But that's okay. If you change your mind, you can find me at the abandoned church on the north side. Can't miss it. It's the rundown building that looks like a strong wind would knock it over. I'll keep that in mind, Naruto said, meaning it. There was something about this goddess, her unguarded enthusiasm, her resilience in the face of obvious rejection, that resonated. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, eating their food while the city moved around them. Hestia finished first, sighing contentedly. Well, I should get going. Jobs to work, bills to pay, the glamorous life of a goddess. She mock saluted him. See you around, mysterious underground adventurer. Naruto, he offered. My name's Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto, she repeated, testing the syllables. Her smile softened into something warmer. That's a nice name. Take care of yourself, okay? The surface can be just as dangerous as the dungeon in different ways. She bounded off into the crowd before he could respond, leaving Naruto standing by the vendor's cart with an odd feeling in his chest. That brief interaction, casual, genuine, untainted by awe or fear, had felt more real than most of his experiences in Orario. He finished his food slowly, savoring each bite and the simple act of standing on a street watching the city live. The sun had fully set now, replaced by magic. Stone lamps that painted the streets in warm light. Different from the dungeon's cold bioluminescence. Better. Movement in his peripheral vision drew his attention. High above, on one of Babel's upper terraces, a figure stood silhouetted against the darkening sky. Distance made details impossible for normal vision, but Naruto's sage's perception filled the gaps automatically. A woman. Impossibly beautiful. The kind of beauty that seemed deliberately crafted to overwhelm mortal comprehension. Silver hair cascaded past her shoulders, and even from this distance, he could sense the weight of her attention like physical pressure. She was looking directly at him. Their eyes met across the impossible distance. Naruto felt something pass between them, recognition perhaps, or challenge, or earnest of a sort that made his instincts scream warnings. Then she smiled, slow and deliberate, before turning away and disappearing into Babel's interior. Friend of yours? Naruto startled slightly. The vendor was watching him with knowing eyes. Never met her, Naruto admitted. That was likely Freya, the vendor said, voice carefully neutral. Goddess of beauty. She doesn't usually take notice of random adventurers. Lucky me, Naruto said dryly. The vendor's expression suggested Naruto's definition of luck might need recalibration. The night deepened as Naruto wandered Orario's streets with no particular destination. He passed taverns spilling raucous laughter into the night, quiet residential areas where families gathered for evening meals, the red light district with its aggressive hospitality. The crafting quarters where forges still burned hot despite the hour. Everything was so alive, so interconnected, people everywhere pursuing their individual purposes within the collective tapestry of the city. And Naruto walked through it like a ghost, present but not participating, observing but not belonging. The isolation felt sharper here than in the dungeon. At least below he'd had the excuse of physical separation. Here, surrounded by thousands, his loneliness was a choice he didn't know how to stop making. He found himself on Orario's northern edge as the night grew late. The building Hestia had described stood out even in darkness, a church that had seen better decades, its architecture still proud despite obvious neglect. Soft light glowed from the windows, suggesting someone was home. Naruto didn't approach, just stood there, looking at the tangible evidence of a goddess who couldn't attract followers, living in poverty, but still maintaining enough optimism to invite random strangers to join her familia based on them seeming nice. There was strength in that. A different kind than he'd cultivated in the dungeon's depths, but strength nonetheless. A sound drew his attention, crying from a nearby alley. His body moved before conscious thought, slipping into the shadows to investigate. 3 men surrounded a young woman, a cat person based on the ears and tail visible in the dim light. The men's postures and slurred speech marked them as drunk and looking for trouble. The woman's biological markers showed terror spiking into panic. Naruto cleared his throat. All 4 turned to look at him. The men's expressions cycled through annoyance, aggression, and finally uncertainty as they registered his appearance, the tattered cloak, the scars, the whisker marks. And something in his eyes that spoke to violence witnessed and committed. "You should leave," Naruto said quietly. "Now. This ain't your business," one man slurred, hand drifting to a knife at his belt. Naruto didn't move, didn't tense, didn't change expression. He simply existed in that moment with perfect stillness, and something in that absolute calm communicated more clearly than threats. The 3 men looked at each other. Whatever they saw in Naruto's stance, it overcame alcohol's confidence. They left, grumbling but moving quickly. The cat woman slumped against the alley wall, ears flat with residual fear. "Thank you," she managed. "I thought they were going to." "You're safe now," Naruto interrupted gently. "Do you need an escort home?" She shook her head. "I live close. I'll be fine." She hesitated. "Are you an adventurer?" "I work at the Benevolent Mistress Tavern. If you come by, I'll make sure you get a free meal." "Least I can do." "Not necessary, but I appreciate it." Naruto offered what he hoped was a reassuring smile. "Get home safe." He watched until she disappeared around a corner, then resumed his aimless wandering. The night had grown deep. Orario settling into its nocturnal rhythms. Different crowds, different purposes, but still that fundamental interconnection he couldn't seem to crack. Eventually, his feet carried him back to Babel. The dungeon entrance would remain open, it always did. He could descend again, return to the familiar isolation of the deep floors, the simple equations of combat and survival. But even thinking about it made something in his chest constrict painfully. Instead, he found a bench near the tower's base and sat, looking up at Orario's sky. The stars were faint, overpowered by the city's lights, but visible if you knew where to look. He'd forgotten about stars during his time below. "You look troubled, child." Naruto's head snapped toward the voice. An old man stood nearby, or had he been there all along? His appearance was unremarkable, but something about him made Naruto's senses uncertain, as if the old man existed slightly out of phase with reality. "Just thinking," Naruto replied carefully. "Dangerous habit, thinking, especially alone in the dark." The old man's smile carried weight. "Though I suppose you're accustomed to darkness. Have we met?" "Not as such, but I make it my business to notice interesting arrivals." The old man studied him with eyes that seemed older than his already ancient face. 7 years is a long time to chase answers in the wrong direction. Naruto tensed. "Who are you?" "Just an observer. A concerned citizen, you might say." The old man gestured at the city around them. "Orario is a place of second chances, you know. Fresh starts. The past matters less here than what you choose to do next." Cryptic advice from mysterious strangers. "Is this a regular thing in this city?" The old man laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "More common than you'd think. But here's something concrete. Loneliness is a choice, but so is connection. The latter requires more courage." Before Naruto could respond, the old man simply wasn't there. Not disappeared in a flash of magic or obvious technique, just absent, as if he'd never existed at all. Naruto sat alone on the bench, turning those words over in his mind. Loneliness is a choice, but so is connection. He'd spent 7 years choosing loneliness in pursuit of answers. And he had nothing to show for it but scars and statistics that impressed people who saw his back. The mystery of his origins remained unsolved. The dungeon's whispers had promised revelation but delivered only more questions. But that conversation with Hestia, that had been real. Saving that cat woman, that had mattered. Even these small interactions with strangers held more substance than years of discovery in the deep floors. The realization settled over him like a weight and a relief simultaneously. He'd been asking the wrong questions. Not, why am I here, but, what am I going to do now that I am? Naruto stood from the bench, body protesting the movement after a full day of consciousness. He needed somewhere to sleep. Preferably somewhere that wasn't a bedroll in the dungeon. Tomorrow he could start figuring out this whole, rejoining society, thing properly. For now, he'd find an inn, rent a room, and sleep in an actual bed for the first time in 7 years. As he walked toward the commercial district where such establishments clustered, he passed a group of adventurers celebrating their safe return. They laughed and jostled each other, recounting the day's events with the exaggeration of shared experience. One noticed Naruto and raised a mug in casual salute. "Hey, you look like you survived something nasty. First drinks on us if you want to share war stories." Naruto paused. The old him, the him from even this morning, would have declined and moved on. But that choice led to 7 years of isolation he could never reclaim. "I could use a drink," he said, surprising himself. The adventurers cheered, welcoming him into their circle with the easy camaraderie of those who understood the dungeon's dangers. And Naruto, for the first time in 7 years, chose connection. The tavern they led him to was loud, crowded, and overwhelming in the best possible way. Someone thrust a mug into his hand. Someone else demanded to know his highest floor reached. The questions came rapid fire, punctuated by laughter and the clatter of more drinks arriving. Naruto answered carefully, editing his experiences to sound impressive but not impossible. He described Floor 30 monsters in detail, having actually fought them thousands of times. He shared a funny story about a dungeon trap that had left him hanging upside down for an hour. He accepted their praise for his evident skill while deflecting questions about his familia. And slowly, gradually, the knot in his chest that had been tightening for 7 years began to loosen. These weren't deep friendships. These people would probably forget his name by morning. But they'd welcomed him, shared their evening, treated him as one of them rather than a curiosity or threat. And that mattered more than he'd realized it could. Hours passed. The crowd thinned as adventurers departed for beds and duties. Naruto finally excused himself, paying for a round of drinks as thanks before stepping back into Orario's night. The city felt different now. Less alien. The streets made more sense. The distant sounds of life, laughter, arguments, music, crying babies, wove together into something that felt almost like a song. He found an inn, paid for a week's lodging with money he'd accumulated from 7 years of casual monster core collection, and climbed stairs to a simple room with a simple bed. Naruto collapsed onto the mattress, not bothering to undress. The ceiling above him was wood and plaster instead of stone. The air smelled of soap and other humans instead of dungeon dampness. Through the walls, he could hear someone snoring, someone else moving around, the ambient proof of proximity to others. Sleep found him quickly. He dreamed of stars and streetlights, of a goddess's smile and silver hair catching moonlight, of voices inviting him to join them, of ascending instead of descending, of hands reaching out rather than delving deeper. And somewhere far below, in the depths past the 100th floor, the dungeon breathed and whispered and waited, because some calls could never be fully escaped, only chosen against, again and again. With every step taken toward the light. Chapter 1 End **# Chapter 2, The Goddess of the Hearth and the Wandering Flame. Morning crashed through Hestia's window with offensive cheer. She groaned, pulling her thin blanket over her head. 5 more minutes. Just 5 more minutes before facing another day of rejection, poverty, and the pitying looks from other odds who'd built thriving familias while she couldn't attract a single adventurer worth. A knock on the church door echoed through the building. Hestia bolted upright, blanket falling away. A visitor. This early. Maybe someone actually interested in joining her familia. She scrambled from bed, nearly tripping over her own feet in her haste, and rushed to make herself presentable. Hair, messy but charmingly so, she decided. Dress, wrinkled from sleeping in it, but that added a lived-in goddess aesthetic, right? Ribbon. She gave up trying to fix it after the third attempt. The knock came again, more insistent. Coming, Hestia called, bounding down the stairs from her tiny loft bedroom. The church's main room looked worse in daylight. Exposed stone, minimal furniture, drafts coming through gaps in the walls. She made a mental note to arrange the space more appealingly, then abandoned the thought because who was she kidding? She yanked open the door, smile bright and welcoming. A middle-aged human woman stood there, expression suggesting she'd eaten something sour. You're behind on rent. Again. Hestia's smile didn't falter, though internally she cursed. Ah, Miss Alvina, how lovely to see you. I was just about to save it. Alvina thrust a paper forward. This is your final notice. Payment in full by week's end, or you're evicted. I've been more than patient with your situation. The paper crinkled in Hestia's grip. I understand. I'll have it. Definitely. Absolutely. Alvina's expression suggested she'd heard this before, because she had, monthly, for the past several months. I mean it this time. Goddess or not, business is business. The door closed with terminal finality. Hestia stared at the notice. The amount listed made her stomach sink. Between her tea-time jobs selling Jagamarukun and the occasional odd work, she could maybe, possibly, if she didn't eat for a week and sacrificed sleep entirely, no, she'd still be short. Stupid Loki and her giant familia, Hestia muttered, crumpling the notice. Stupid Freya and her beautiful everything. Stupid me for thinking I could make this work. She slumped against the door, sliding down until she sat on the cold floor. Being a goddess was supposed to be different. Special. When she'd descended from Tenkai, she'd imagined adventure, purpose, making a real difference in mortal lives. Instead, she got poverty, rejection, and the growing certainty that maybe she just wasn't cut out for this. The memory of last night's encounter surfaced, that blonde adventurer with the whisker marks and sad eyes. Naruto. He'd been kind, genuine, the type of person she'd love to have in her familia, except he'd gently turned her down like everyone else. Story of her existence. Hestia forced herself to stand. Self-pity accomplished nothing. She had work to do, money to earn, and exactly 7 days to produce a financial miracle. Time to get moving. Naruto woke to sunlight and confusion. The ceiling was wrong. Too close. Made of wood instead of stone that breathed. The air tasted wrong. Dry and dusty instead of the dungeon's particular mineral dampness. The sounds were wrong. Footsteps and voices instead of distant monster cries and water dripping. Then memory reasserted itself. Right. In Orario. Surface. He'd actually done it. Left the dungeon, rejoined civilization, made an attempt at normalcy. His body protested movement with unfamiliar complaints. Sleeping on a soft mattress apparently used different muscles than a bedroll on stone. Everything ached in new and creative ways. The room was small but clean. Bed, washbasin, simple desk and chair, window overlooking Orario's morning bustle. Naruto's tattered cloak hung on a wall hook, looking even worse in daylight. His other possessions amounted to weapons sealed in storage scrolls and the clothes on his back. He needed to fix that. Couldn't rebuild a life with nothing but combat skills and dungeon expertise. Washing was a luxury after years of dungeon streams. The inn provided actual soap, which felt decadent. Naruto scrubbed away layers of grime, watching the water turn progressively darker. His reflection in the basin owed someone almost familiar. The whisker marks were definitely his, but the hardness around his eyes felt wrong. He was 25, not ancient. When had he started looking like he'd seen too much? Dressing in his least damaged clothes, which still looked rough by civilian standards, Naruto headed downstairs. The inn's common room served breakfast to its guests. Bread, eggs, some kind of porridge. He ate mechanically while eavesdropping on conversations. Loki Familia's planning another deep expedition. Prices at the market are robbery, I swear. Did you hear about that new monster species on floor 27? Normal concerns. Daily life. The mundane miracle of people living without existential dread. Naruto finished eating and stepped into Orario's morning. The city looked different in daylight, less mysterious. More practical. People moved with purpose toward jobs and errands. Street vendors set up their wares. Adventurers headed toward the dungeon in groups, checking equipment and discussing strategy. He needed a plan. Money first. He had some saved, but not enough for long-term stability. Then proper equipment, since his current gear was barely functional. Maybe find some kind of work that wasn't just killing monsters for cores. Build an actual life instead of just existing. The thought was simultaneously exciting and terrifying. His wandering took him through the commercial district. Shops were opening, displaying their goods. Weapons, armor, potions, magic items, provisions. Everything an adventurer needed, at prices that made Naruto's savings feel inadequate. A commotion ahead drew his attention. A small crowd had gathered around what looked like a recruitment effort, several people in matching uniforms trying to attract potential familia members. Naruto drifted closer out of curiosity. The recruiters were professional and polished, their pitch well rehearsed. Join the Takemikazuki familia. Honorable combat, fair treatment, opportunities for advancement. They'd attracted a decent audience of interested adventurers. And standing at the crowd's edge, looking determinedly optimistic, was Hestia. She'd positioned herself near the recruitment effort. She with a hand-painted sign that read, Hestia Familia seeking members. In enthusiastic but slightly crooked letters. Her smile was bright enough to rival the sun, but Naruto's sensory abilities deet. CTED the biological markers of stress underneath. Elevated cortisol, tension in her shoulders, the minute trembling of someone forcing confidence. Nobody was paying her any attention. Naruto watched, as adventurer after adventurer walked past her, some not even glancing at her sign. Hestia maintained her smile with determined persistence, occasionally calling out, the Hestia Familia offers person. Al attention and unlimited growth potential. Her voice carried genuine enthusiasm despite the lack of response. One adventurer actually stopped. Hestia's entire demeanor brightened, launching into W. Hat was clearly a prepared speech. Thank you for your interest. As a member of my familia, you'd receive. What's your familia's rank? The adventurer interrupted. Well, we're newly established, so. How many members? Currently seeking our first, which means you'd have my complete focus and. So none. What resources can you offer? Funding for equipment. Access to specialty trainers. Hestia's smile faltered. I'm working on building those resources, but what I can offer is genuine care and. The adventurer had already walked away. Hestia's shoulders sagged for just a moment before she forcibly straightened them. Smile returning though slightly dimmer. She adjusted her sign and tried again. Hestia Familia. We're your family, not just a member. Naruto felt something twist in his chest. The determination in the face of repeated rejection, the refusal to give up despite obvious futility, he recognized that stubborn hope. He'd carried something similar into the dungeon for 7 years. Before he'd consciously decided to move, his feet were carrying him toward her. Hestia noticed his approach, and her eyes widened with recognition. Oh, Naruto, right, from last night. Morning, he said, recruitment going well. Her laugh was only slightly forced. Oh, you know, lots of interest. Just waiting for the right person who appreciates what the Hestia Familia offers. The words were bright, but her eyes told a different story. How long have you been at this? The question seemed to catch her off guard. About 3 hours. I wanted to catch the morning crowd before they headed to the dungeon. 3 hours of rejection. 3 hours maintaining that smile. Naruto's respect for her climbed several notches. Have you eaten? He asked. Hestia blinked. What? Breakfast. Have you had any? When she didn't immediately answer, he continued. There's a place nearby that does good bread and eggs. My treat, if you want a break. I couldn't possibly. I'm in the middle of. She looked at her sign, at the crowd still ignoring her existence, and something in her expression crumbled slightly. Actually, that sounds really nice. She propped her sign against a wall with careful optimism, as if it might attract someone while she was gone. Naruto didn't point out the unlikelihood. The cafe he led her to was small and unpretentious, the kind of place that served good food without frills. They claimed a corner table, and Naruto ordered for both of them, comprehensive breakfast with extra pastries because Hestia's biological signs suggested she'd skipped dinner too. You didn't have to do this, Hestia said once the food arrived, though her hands moved toward the pastries with telling speed. Wanted to. Naruto replied simply. Besides, you bought me Jagamaru-kun with your philosophy last night. This is returning the favor, ya know. She smiled around a mouthful of bread, somehow making it look dignified. After swallowing. So what brings you out this morning? Dungeon crawling. Just exploring the city. I've been away from surface life for a while. Trying to figure out how it works again. How long is a while? 7 years, give or take. Hestia nearly choked on her pastry. 7 years. You were in the dungeon for 7 years. More or less. Naruto kept his tone casual. I had safe zones established. It wasn't as dramatic as it sounds. That's incredibly dramatic. That's possibly the most dramatic thing I've heard this month. She leaned forward, genuine curiosity replacing her earlier stress. What was that like, being alone for so long? The question was more perceptive than she probably realized. Naruto considered his answer carefully. Quiet, he said finally. You get used to your own company. Start having full conversations in your head. The monsters become almost like neighbors. You learn their patterns, their territories. It's peaceful in a way. He paused, and incredibly lonely in others. Hestia's expression softened into something understanding. I get that. Loneliness in the crowd versus loneliness in isolation. Not sure which is worse. You feel lonely. The question escaped, before Naruto could consider its appropriateness. She didn't seem offended, just thoughtful. I'm a goddess nobody wants. All my friends from Tenkai have thriving familias. Loki's got dozens of high-level adventurers. Freya's got her pick of anyone she wants. Even Mayak managed to attract a few members before his financial troubles. And here's Hestia, can't even get a single person to take her seriously. She forced brightness into her tone. But that's fine. Just means when I do find my familia members, they'll be extra special. The optimism in the face of evident pain was familiar. Naruto had worn similar masks. For what it's worth, he said, their loss. Any adventurer would be lucky to have a goddess who actually cares about them as people. Hestia's eyes went suspiciously shiny. That's really kind of you to say. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. The cafe filled and emptied around them, morning shifting toward midday. Naruto found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't since emerging from the dungeon. No pressure, no expectations, just shared food and easy company. Can I ask you something? Hestia ventured. Last night you said you don't have a familia. But you're clearly skilled enough to have survived 7 years in the dungeon solo. Why not join one? You'd have your pick of offers if they knew what you could do. Naruto considered the question. Honestly, I'm not sure I'd fit. Familias have hierarchies, politics, expectations. I've gotten used to operating alone, making my own decisions. Not sure I'm ready to give that up. But you're lonely, Hestia said gently. You said so yourself. Yeah, he met her eyes. That's the problem, isn't it? Wanting connection but not knowing how to fit into the structures that provide it. Hestia nodded slowly, something passing between them, mutual recognition of a shared struggle. I think, she said carefully, that maybe the right connection wouldn't require you to fit into anything. It would just work. Like two puzzle pieces that complement each other instead of forcing shapes to match. That's a nice thought. It's what I believe the relationship between God and child should be. She said it with quiet conviction. Not ownership or control, but partnership. The God provides blessing and guidance, the child provides purpose and growth. Both benefit, both matter. Naruto found himself genuinely curious. Is that unusual? Among gods, I mean. Some would say so. Hestia shrugged. Most gods treat their familias like game pieces or collections. Freya wants beautiful souls to possess. Loki wants entertainment and power. Even the kind ones often see their children as lessers to be guided rather than equals to be partnered with. She smiled. But Hestia knows what she wants. A real family, not just a faction. Quote, the third-person reference was oddly endearing. Naruto smiled. Well, when you find your people, they'll be lucky to have you. Unless I get evicted first, Hestia muttered, then looked horrified. Sorry, that slipped out. Evicted. She slumped in her chair. Rent's due. I'm short. My landlord's finally lost patience with me. She pulled out the crumpled notice, smoothing it on the table. I have 7 days to produce more money than I can reasonably earn, or I lose the church. Naruto studied the amount listed. It was substantial but not impossible. What about your friends? Other gods? I can't ask them for help again. They've already loaned me money I haven't paid back. Hephaestus especially. She's been so generous, and I just keep disappointing her. Hestia's voice went quiet. Maybe this is a sign. Maybe I should just admit I'm not cut out for the surface and return to Tenkai. Do you want to return? No. The word burst out with surprising vehemence. I love it here. Even with the poverty and rejection, I love being part of the mortal world. There's so much life and possibility and growth. In Tenkai everything's static. Same conversations, same politics. Same eternal boredom. Here, every day is different. Every person I meet has their own story. She deflated slightly. But wanting something doesn't make you capable of achieving it. Naruto understood that sentiment intimately. How many times had he wanted answers from the dungeon that never came? An idea occurred to him. Probably stupid. Definitely impulsive. But the alternative was watching this determined goddess give up, and something in him rebelled against that. What if I helped? He heard himself say. Hestia looked up. What? With your rent? I've got some saved up. It's not enough to cover everything, but it'd help. I couldn't possibly accept that. Hestia looked genuinely scandalized. We barely know each other. So let's fix that. Spend the day together. You show me around Orario properly, help me figure out surface life. I'll help with your errands, and we'll call it payment for guide services. She studied him with an intensity that felt like it pierced through to something essential. Why would you do this? What do you get out of it? Honesty felt important here. Company. Purpose for the day. The satisfaction of helping someone who deserves it. Naruto shrugged. And maybe I'm tired of being alone. Hestia's expression cycled through surprise, suspicion, hope, and finally settling on cautious acceptance. One condition. Name it. Let me see your status. Quote. Naruto tensed. Why? Because you claim to have no familia, no fauna, but you survived 7 years in the dungeon. That's impossible for a normal person. Her eyes were sharp despite her gentle tone. I need to know what I'm dealing with. If you're some kind of spirit or monster in disguise, I deserve to know before accepting your help. Fair enough. Naruto had expected this conversation eventually. I'm human, he said carefully. But my status is unusual. It might freak you out. I'm a goddess. I've seen unusual. They returned to the church after Naruto paid for breakfast. Hestia's home looked even more rundown in full daylight, testament to both her poverty and her determination to make it work anyway. She'd arranged the space with care, a small altar to one side. Furniture that was old but clean, touches of warmth despite the building's bones showing through. Make yourself comfortable, Hestia said, gesturing to a worn couch. Quote, I'll need you to remove your shirt and sit with your back to me. Naruto complied, pulling off his shirt and settling into position. The church's interior was cool against his skin. He felt Hestia's presence behind him. Heard her small gasp. You have a fauna, she breathed. But this script, I've never seen anything like it. I don't know where it came from, Naruto admitted. When I woke up in Orario 7 years ago, it was already there. It's grown with me as I've explored. Hestia's fingers traced the characters on his back, divine touch reading what mortal eyes couldn't fully comprehend. Naruto felt the tingle of her power examining his status, cataloging the impossible statistics and abilities. The silence stretched, became uncomfortable. Naruto's sensory abilities detected Hestia's heart rate accelerating, her breathing becoming shallow. Hestia, this is. Her voice shook. Naruto, these numbers. This isn't just unusual, this is, you're beyond any adventurer I've ever heard of. Level 10 at minimum, maybe higher. And these skills, this magic. She moved around to face him, expression stunned. How is this possible? I don't know, he said simply. The dungeon changed me. Every floor I conquered, every limit I pushed, the status evolved. It's like the dungeon itself granted me a fauna. Dungeons don't give blessings. That's what gods do. But even as she said it, doubt crept into her voice. Unless what? Hestia sat heavily, mind clearly racing. There are old stories, ancient myths about the dungeon's origins. Some claim it's alive, conscious. With purposes we don't understand. Most gods dismiss those as superstition. She looked at him with new intensity. But what if they're not? What if the dungeon actually chose you, blessed you directly? Naruto had considered this. It would explain why it calls to me. Why I feel drawn to deeper floors even when there's no logical reason. It calls to you. Hestia's alarm was palpable. Naruto, that's incredibly dangerous. If the dungeon has some kind of hold on you. I know. He met her eyes. That's part of why I left. I could feel myself being pulled deeper, losing touch with humanity. The isolation was changing me into something I didn't want to be. He smiled without humor. Turns out even godlike power gets lonely. Hestia was quiet for a long moment, processing. When she spoke, her voice was gentle. Thank you for telling me. I know that wasn't easy. You going to report me to the guild? Or run away screaming? Neither. She said it firmly. You trusted me with this. I'm not going to betray that. A smile tugged at her lips. Though I'm definitely conflicted about accepting financial help from someone who might be more powerful than most gods. My money spends the same as anyone's. She laughed, tension breaking. Fair point. Standing, she offered her hand. All right, Naruto Uzumaki, you want to help with my day. Let's start with the absolute glamorous world of goddess errands. The afternoon became a whirlwind tour of Hestia's daily life. First stop. Returning equipment she'd borrowed from Hephaestus Familia. The smith goddess herself was out. But her Familia members treated Hestia with a mix of affection and pity that made Naruto's teeth clench. Next. Her part-time job selling Jagamaru-kun at a street corner. Hestia changed into a work uni. Foreman dove into sales with infectious enthusiasm, calling out to passers-by with genuine joy. Naruto helped however he could, setting up, managing money, occasionally using his sensory abilities to identify approaching customers so Hestia could time her pitches. You're a natural, Hestia exclaimed during a rare lull. Ever considered sales as a career? I'll stick to monster hunting, thanks. Your loss. The Jagamaru-kun industry is criminally underrepresented in the adventuring economy. They worked through the lunch rush. Hestia's energy never flagged, her smile never dimmed, even as her feet clearly ached and her voice grew hoarse. This was what she did every day. Multiple jobs, constant hustle, all while maintaining optimism that should be impossible. When their shift ended, Hestia counted the earnings with practiced efficiency. Not bad. This plus my other jobs this week might actually get me close to what I need. Naruto doubted it based on the numbers, but didn't say so. Their wandering took them through Orario's shopping district. Hestia pointed out significant locations. That's the Benevolent Mistress Tavern. Best food in the city, though I can't afford to eat there. Over there's the Twilight Manor where Loki Familia lives. It's massive and fancy and I'm definitely not jealous. And that building with all the flowers is Freya's Folkvanger, where she holds court like some kind of beauty queen goddess. Which, okay, she is, but still. The running commentary was informative and entertaining. Hestia had opinions about everything, delivered with endearing bluntness. Where to next? Naruto asked as afternoon drifted toward evening. Hestia considered. I should probably get back to recruitment, but honestly I'm not sure I can handle more rejection today. An idea struck Naruto. What if I showed you something instead? Payment for the tour. Suspicion and curiosity warred on her face. What kind of something? A place I found during my early dungeon exploration. Something special. 20 minutes later, they stood at the dungeon's entrance. Hestia eyed it nervously. I'm not exactly equipped for delving. We're not going deep. Just past the Saint floor, there's a safe passage that leads somewhere most people miss. The upper dungeon was busy with afternoon adventurers. Naruto led Hestia through familiar corridors, taking turns that seemed random but followed a pattern only he knew. His sensory abilities mapped nearby adventurers, steering them away from encounters. How do you know where you're going? Hestia asked, jogging slightly to keep up. Practice. The dungeon has rhythms once you learn to read them. They descended to what appeared to be a dead end, a collapsed tunnel that most adventurers would skip past. Naruto approached a specific section of wall and pressed his hand against it. A seal he'd placed years ago responded, and the collapsed section revealed itself as illusion. Beyond was a narrow passage leading upward, not down. Secret tunnel. Hestia's excitement was childlike. This is so cool. The passage opened into a natural grotto that technically existed outside the dungeon proper, a geological anomaly in Orario's bedrock. A hot spring filled the chamber, fed by volcanic activity deep below, venting through gaps in the ceiling that let in filtered sunlight. Moss and strange fungi created bioluminescent patterns on the walls. The air was warm and humid, smelling of minerals and growing things. Hestia's breath caught. This is beautiful. Found it during my first month in Orario, Naruto said. Used to come here when the dungeon got too intense. It's peaceful. They sat at the spring's edge, feet dangling in the warm water. Hestia sighed with relief as the heat soaked into her aching muscles. Thank you for showing me this, she said quietly. Thank you for the company. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the play of light on water. Eventually, Hestia spoke. Can I ask what you're going to do now? Long term. I mean, you can't just wander around Orario forever. Why not? Naruto asked, half joking. Because you're lonely, and wandering alone doesn't fix that. She said it gently but firmly. You need connections. Purpose beyond just existing. Tried that in the dungeon. Didn't work out. That's because the dungeon can't love you back. Hestia drew her knees up, wrapping her arms around them. People can, though, if you let them. Naruto studied her profile. This small goddess with her enormous heart, struggling against a world that didn't value what she offered. Is that what you tell yourself? When you're facing eviction and rejection? Every single day, she smiled, sad but genuine. It's why I keep trying. Somewhere out there is someone who needs exactly what I can give. I just have to keep looking until I find them. What if you don't find them? I mean, then I'll be sad, and I'll go back to Tenkai, and eventually it won't hurt anymore. She looked at him. But at least I'll know I tried. That I didn't give up just because it was hard. The words settled into Naruto's chest, finding resonance with his own recent realizations. How much of his 7 years had been giving up, choosing isolation because connection was hard. The dungeon whispers to me, he said suddenly. I can hear it, feel it, like there's something down there calling my name. Promising answers about why I'm here, what I'm supposed to be. He looked at his reflection in the water. For years, I chased that. Went deeper and deeper, convinced the next floor would explain everything. But there's always another floor, another mystery, another reason to keep descending. Hestia listened without interruption. At some point I realized the dungeon doesn't have answers. It just has more questions. And I was using those questions as an excuse to avoid the harder choice. He met her eyes. Being around people is terrifying. They can reject you, hurt you, leave. The dungeon's simple. Fight, survive, descend. But it's also empty. So you came back up, Hestia said. So I came back up, he confirmed. Still don't know what I'm doing. Still feel the pull downward. But I'm trying to choose differently, ya know. Hestia was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice trembled slightly. Would you consider joining my familia? Naruto had expected this. Hestia, I know. You're not ready for commitments. But hear me out. She turned to face him fully. You need connection but independence. I need a familia member but can't offer much in terms of resources. What if we partnered? You'd be my first child, which means my complete attention and support. In return, you'd give me purpose and help when you're willing. No obligations beyond mutual respect. It was tempting. More tempting than it should be. I'd be a terrible familia member, Naruto said quietly. I'm still figuring out how to be around people. I disappear into my own head. Sometimes the dungeon calls and I'm not sure I'm strong enough to resist. Nobody's perfect. Hestia's smile was gentle. I'm a broke goddess who can't attract followers and stress eats fried potatoes. We'd be a mess together. Naruto laughed despite himself. That's not exactly a strong sales pitch. No, but it's honest. She offered her hand. What do you say? Want to be a mess together? The offer hung between them. Genuine and free of ulterior motive. Naruto looked at her hand, considering. Part of him wanted to accept. Wanted the anchor of belonging, the structure of a familia, He simple answer to his directionless wandering. Hestia was kind, understanding, and saw him as a person rather than a collection of abilities. But another part, the part shaped by 7 years of self-reliance, hesitated. What if he accepted and then couldn't follow through? What if the dungeon called and he abandoned her? What if his presence brought danger she couldn't handle? I can't, he said finally, watching her face fall. Not yet. I'm still too unstable, too uncertain. You deserve a familiar member who can commit fully, not someone who might vanish into the dungeon at any moment. Hestia lowered her hand, trying to hide her disappointment. I understand. But, Naruto continued, I can offer friendship. Help when you need it. Company when I'm not spiraling. He smiled. And I'll keep the option open. Maybe once I've figured myself out a bit more, we can revisit this. The hope that lit Hestia's face was almost painful in its intensity. Really? You mean that? Yeah, you're someone worth sticking around for. Ya know. Hestia launched herself at him in a tackle hug that nearly knocked them both into the spring. Thank you. You don't know what this means to me. Naruto steadied them, awkwardly returning the embrace. Human contact still felt foreign after so long, but this was nice. Warm. The kind of connection he'd been missing without knowing how to name it. They separated, both slightly flustered. Hestia wiped at suspiciously shiny eyes. Sorry, I got emotional. It's been a rough few months. It's fine. Naruto stood, offering her a hand up. We should probably head back before the dungeon gets too active. The return journey was quieter, both lost in thought. The dungeon's evening shift was beginning. Different monsters, different adventurers, the ecosystem cycling through its eternal patterns. Naruto navigated automatically, mind elsewhere. At the church, they paused outside. Thank you for today, Hestia said. Really, it was the best day I've had in ages. Same, Naruto admitted. Turns out spending time with people isn't completely terrible. She laughed. High praise. I'll treasure it forever. Her expression sobered slightly. Naruto, even if you're not ready to join my familia, please don't disappear. Visit sometimes. Let me know you're okay. I can do that. Promise. He recognized the fear underneath, of being abandoned, forgotten, deemed insufficient. Naruto knew that fear intimately. I promise, he said firmly. You're stuck with me now, whether you like it or not. Hestia's smile could have powered the city's lights. I like it very much. Later that night, alone in her church, Hestia replayed the day's events. Meeting Naruto again, learning his impossible secret, sharing the hidden hot spring, the almost recruitment. Her emotions tangled together, excitement, disappointment, hope, fear. He was special, not just because of his power, though that was staggering, but because underneath the strength and scars and isolation, he was genuinely kind, lost, like her, trying to find belonging in a world that didn't offer easy answers. She wanted him in her familia, wanted to bless him officially, too, have that bond gods shared with their children. But she also understood his hesitation. 7 years of isolation didn't heal overnight. So she'd wait, be his friend, prove that connection didn't have to mean chains. Hestia pulled out the rent notice, studying the impossible number. She was still short, still facing eviction, but somehow, the crisis felt less crushing. Because she had a friend now. Someone who saw her value beyond what she could provide materially. That was worth more than money. Though she still needed to figure out the money situation. Details. Naruto lay in his inn room, staring at the ceiling. Today had been good. Better than good. It had felt almost normal. Like he was a regular person doing regular things with a friend. The word felt foreign in his mind. Friend. Did he have the right to claim that after one day of hanging out? Or was he presuming too much, reading connection into what was just politeness? His thoughts spiraled in familiar patterns, doubt, overthinking. The urge to retreat back underground where things made sense. Then he remembered Hestia's smile. Her laugh. The way she'd hugged him with unself-conscious affection. The promise he'd made to not disappear. Naruto closed his eyes, letting those memories anchor him. Tomorrow, he'd find work. Make money. Build a real life on the surface. And maybe, if he kept choosing connection over isolation, eventually it would feel natural instead of terrifying. The dungeon whispered to him still, a distant call promising answers and purpose. But for the first time in 7 years, Naruto whispered back, not today. And the whisper didn't seem quite so loud. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, Beauty's Obsession and the Unchanging Soul. Freya, goddess of beauty, was bored. Not the temporary ennui of an idle afternoon. Not the mild dissatisfaction with inferior entertainment. This was the bone-deep boredom of an immortal who had experienced every variation of mortal experience across millennia. Who had witnessed the same patterns repeat in different costumes, who knew with certainty that nothing truly new existed beneath the sun. Until 3 nights ago, she stood on Folkvanger's highest balcony, silver hair catching moonlight like strands of captured stars. The city sprawled beneath her, Orario, her playground, her garden of souls. Freya saw them all constantly, those flickering flames of mortal essence. Beautiful ones, ugly ones, brilliant ones that burned too bright and shattered, dim ones that persisted through sheer stubbornness. All of them predictable, all of them ultimately the same. Except one. Her eyes, divine sight that pierced flesh to perceive the truth beneath, found him even now. That soul, walking Orario's streets with the uncertain gait of someone relearning civilization. His inner light a paradox that should not exist. Gold and crimson intertwined, brilliance and shadow in perfect equilibrium. Pain and hope twisted together so thoroughly they became indistinguishable. And at the core, something she had never witnessed. A soul that contained multitudes while remaining singular, as if he existed in several states simultaneously. Freya's fingers tightened on the balcony railing. "My lady." Ottar's voice came from behind her. Her captain, her Einherjar, the warrior she had cultivated into Orario's strongest adventurer. He approached with that peculiar silence massive men developed when trained properly, stopping at a respectful distance. "Speak," Freya commanded, not turning from her observation. "The target you indicated. Intelligence has compiled preliminary information." "Tell me." Ottar's report was efficient, thorough. "Naruto Uzumaki. Registered with the guild 3 years ago but filed no updates until yesterday. Claims no familia affiliation. Guild records are partially sealed, suggesting classified information. Physical description matches your specifications. Currently residing at the Amber Moon Inn, Northwest District. Background: none discoverable. He appeared in Orario 7 years ago with no prior history. Several familias attempted recruitment, all were declined. He entered the dungeon and effectively vanished from society until this week." Freya considered this a mystery. Then, even better. "Bring him to me. By force, my lady." "An invitation, Ottar. I am not some crude deity who must resort to kidnapping." Her smile held edges. "Yet, extend courteous invitation to Folkvanger tomorrow evening. Phrase it such that declining would be impolite." "Understood." Ottar hesitated. Which was it? Self unusual enough to warrant attention. "May I speak freely?" "Always." "This one troubles you. I have not seen you this focused on a single soul in years." Freya finally turned to face her captain. Ottar was a monument in human form. 2 meters of disciplined muscle, bore features speaking to his animal person heritage, eyes that had seen countless battlefields. He served her with absolute loyalty, beautiful in his devotion. And she felt nothing looking at him. Appreciation, certainly. Pride in her greatest work. But not interest. Not anymore. The thrill of cultivating him had faded once the project completed. "He troubles me because he should not exist," Freya said softly. "That soul defies every pattern I have observed across ages. It is a contradiction that persists, an impossible equation that nonetheless resolves." Her voice dropped to something almost vulnerable. "It is new, Ottar. In all my eternity, something genuinely new." Understanding crossed her captain's face. "You wish to possess it. I wish to understand it." Possession. Freya looked back toward where her divine sight tracked that golden crimson flame. "We shall see. Naruto's second morning on the surface began with a knock that nearly shattered his door. He jerked awake, combat instincts flooding his system before consciousness caught up. Not an attack. Wrong rhythm. Someone knocking. Right. Civilization. People used doors. "Coming," he called, voice rough with sleep. The hallway revealed an absolute mountain of a man. Bore features, immaculate armor despite the early hour, presence de. He screamed danger to every one of Naruto's senses. This was a warrior, capital W. Someone who had refined violence into art. Naruto Uzumaki. The voice matched the appearance. Deep, controlled, formal. That's me. I am Ottar, captain of Freya Familia. My goddess extends invitation to dine with her this evening at Folkvanger. She requests the honor of your company. Several things clicked into place. The woman watching him from Babel, the attention he'd felt prickling across his awareness yesterday, the name Hestia had mentioned with complicated emotions. Freya, goddess of beauty, apparental, why interested in him for reasons he couldn't fathom. I appreciate the invitation, Naruto said carefully, but I'm not really looking for familiar recruitment right now. This is not recruitment. MPLY dinner and conversation between interested parties. Ottar's expression remained neutral. My goddess rarely extends personal invitations. Declining would be considered noteworthy. The unspo Ken threat was clear. Refuse and make an enemy of Orario's most powerful familia. Naruto's initial instinct was to do exactly that. He'd faced worse than political pressure, but caution prevailed. He was trying to integrate into society, which meant navigating social dynamics he didn't fully understand. What time? He asked. Sunset. I will return to escort you. Ottar departed with the same silent efficiency he'd arrived with, leaving Naruto standing in his doorway processing the interaction. This was going to be complicated. News traveled through Orario's divine circles at the speed of gossip, which was to say, faster than light. By midday, every god and goddess of significance knew Freya had personally invited an unknown adventurer to Folkvanger. The speculation began immediately. In Twilight Manor's opulent common room, Loki sprawled across a settee with the boneless grace of a cat, red hair fanning around her like spilled wine. Her familia's executive members had gathered for their regular strategy meeting, but her attention had shifted entirely to this new development. So, she drawled, examining her nails with studied casualness, anybody wanna tell me who this mystery man is that's got the beauty queen so interested? Finn, the Palom captain of Loki Familia, consulted notes with characteristic precision. Very little concrete information. Naruto Uzumaki, registered but Familia less. Apparently skilled enough to survive extended solo dungeon exploration. The guild has sealed portions of his file, which suggests either danger or political sensitivity. Or both, added Riveria, the high elf strategist whose centuries of experience made her counsel invaluable. Freya doesn't notice ordinary adventurers. If she's extending personal invitations, this individual represents something significant. Loki's grin sharpened. Now that sounds interesting. What do you think? A's Tan. Wanna check out this mysterious stranger? A's Wallenstein, Loki family. A's strongest and Orario's sword princess, looked up from the sword she'd been maintaining. Her golden eyes held their usual distant quality, expression neutral. If he interests Freya, he's strong. That's simple, huh? Loki's amusement was genuine. Her precious A's Tan, always so straightforward. Well, I ain't about to let Freya have all the fun. Maybe we should accidentally run into this guy, see what the fuss is about. Is that wise? Riveria asked. If Freya has claimed interest, interfering could trigger political complications. Which is exactly why it'll be hilarious. Loki sat up, energized by the prospect of chaos. Come on, Riveria, when has staying safe ever been fun? Besides, I'm curious now. Anyone who makes the beauty queen move personally deserves at least a conversation. Finn sighed with the long-suffering patience of someone managing Loki's whims for years. If you're determined to pursue this, at least be strategic about it. We don't need open conflict with Freya Familia. Strategic is my middle name, Loki declared, which was blatantly false and everyone knew it. A's Tan, you're with me. We'll just happen to be in the area when Lady Loki, one of He Manor's staff interrupted from the doorway. There's a commotion at the guild. Apparently someone submitted monster cores from the deep floors, and the evaluators are arguing about authenticity. Loki's eyes gleamed. Deep floors. Huh, how deep? The rumors say 40s. Well, Loki stood, stretching theatrically. Sounds like our mystery man's making waves. Come on, A's Tan. Let's go investigate. A's sheathed her sword with smooth finality and followed. Not because she particularly cared about guild drama, but because strength interested her. Always had. The possibility of someone who'd soloed the deep floors, that merited attention. Naruto's visit to the guild had been purely practical. convert monster cores to money, fund his continued surface existence, avoid T.N. King about the dinner invitation waiting at sunset. It had not been intended to create a spectacle. The problem emerged when he dumped his collection on the exchange counter, 7 years worth of cores he'd accumulated casually. Never bothering to sell because what did he need money for in the dungeon? The young clerk had gone progressively paler as she sorted through them. "Sir," she'd said, voice strangled. "These are from floors 30 through 50. Yeah, you're aware that cores from those depths are extremely valuable and also extremely difficult to obtain. I mean, I was down there anyway. Seemed wasteful to leave them." Now he stood in an evaluation chamber, surrounded by guild officials who looked at him like he was either a fraud or a phenomenon, while 3 different experts examined his cores with specialized equipment. "Authentic," one declared. "Definitely authentic," confirmed another. "This Shadow Grim core is perfect quality," the third added. "I haven't seen specimens this pristine in years." Quote, a supervisor Naruto didn't recognize consulted paperwork with increasing confusion. "Mr. Uzumaki, these cores represent several months of work for a full party of high-level adventurers. You're claiming you collected them solo." "Over 7 years, Naruto clarified. "It's not like I got them all at once. 7 years of deep floor exploration. Solo. Successfully." The supervisor's tone suggested he was trying to make this make sense and failing. "Sir, I need to be frank, that's essentially impossible. And yet here are the cores." The supervisor couldn't argue with physical evidence. "Yes, here they are." He calculated something on an abacus, cross-referenced with a ledger, calculated again. "Total value comes to approximately 3 million valis." Naruto blinked. That seemed like a lot. Was that a lot? He'd lost touch with Orario's economy. "Is that good?" he asked. Every person in the room stared at him. "That's," the supervisor said carefully, "enough to live comfortably for several years. Or fund a small familia's operations for months. Or purchase exceptional equipment." "Yes, Mr. Uzumaki. That is good." "Huh." Naruto considered this. "Well, I'll take it in whatever's convenient. Cash, I guess." The room erupted into organized chaos. Forms to fill out, security to arrange for transferring that much currency, verification processes to complete. Naruto stood at the center of it feeling vaguely overwhelmed. Which was when the door opened and admitted 2 new people. The first was female, short but with presence that filled the room, crimson hair. Distinctive red facial markings under her eyes, clothes that somehow managed to look both expensive and deliberately casual. She moved with a loose, confident gait. That reminded Naruto of predators pretending to be harmless. The second was also female, taller, with golden hair and eyes that immediately focused on Naruto with unsettling intensity. Beautiful in a way that seemed almost artificial. Like someone had designed the perfect warrior aesthetic. She wore light armor and carried a rapier with the ease of constant companionship. Well, the red-haired woman declared. "Looks like we found him, Tan. Our mystery man." The supervisor immediately shifted to diplomatic mode. "Lady Loki, Lady A's. How may the guild assist you?" Loki. That name again. Naruto recalled Hestia's description. Massive familia, one of Orario's most powerful gods, Freya's social rival. "Just curious about the commotion," Loki said breezily, though her eyes assessed Naruto with sharp intelligence. "Heard someone was making the evaluators earn their pay." "A routine core exchange," the supervisor said, professionally deflecting. "Routine." Loki's grin suggests. She knew exactly how not routine this was. "Right. Hey, mystery man, you got a name, or should I just keep calling you that?" Naruto met her gaze evenly. "Naruto Uzumaki." "Naruto. Huh, unusual name. I like it." She approached with zero regard for personal space, circling him like examining a curiosity. "You're the guy who's got Freya all worked up, ain't ya?" "I don't know about worked up. She invited me to dinner." "Oh, honey, when Freya personally invites someone, that's the definition of worked up." Loki stopped directly in front of him. "So what's your deal? Why's a skilled adventu? Like you flying solo instead of joining a familia?" "Personal preference. He likes his independence, got it." Loki's expression shifted to something more serious. "Word of advice, Naruto. Freya's attention ain't always a blessing. She sees something she wants, she takes it. Doesn't matter what you prefer. Naruto appreciated the warning, even if the delivery was theatrical. I can take care of myself. Can you? The question came from A's, her first words. Her voice was surprisingly soft, almost monotone. Yeah, Naruto said simply. A's stared at him for a long moment. Prove it, A's tan. Loki laughed. You can't just challenge random people. Want to see. A's focus hadn't wavered from Naruto. If he's strong. Naruto felt a smile tug at his lips despite himself. T.S. was straightforward in a way divine politics weren't. You want to spar? Yes. Okay. He looked at the increasingly nervous supervisor. Can we finish this transaction first? 20 minutes later, Naruto walked out of guild headquarters with a banking voucher representing more money than he'd ever possessed and 2 unexpected companions. Loki chattered constantly, peppering him with questions he deflected with practiced ease. A's walked in silence, her attention alternating between him and the surrounding environment with tactical awareness. They reached an open training ground used by adventurers to practice between expeditions. A few people were present, but cleared out quickly when they recognized A's Wallenstein. Rules? Naruto asked, rolling his shoulders. No killing, A's said. First blood or surrender. Works for me. They took positions opposite each other. Loki settled on a nearby bench with every appearance of delighted anticipation. Begin, she called. A's moved. Fast. Faster than almost anyone Naruto had fought. Her rapier blurred toward his throat with precision born of countless battles. Most opponents would have been skewered before they processed the attack. Naruto sidestepped, body angling to let the blade pass millimeters from his skin. His hand came up, fingers catching A's wrist in a grip that arrested her momentum completely. Her eyes widened fractionally. They separated, circling. A's expression had shifted from neutral to focused, the look of someone who'd found interesting prey. She attacked again, this time with a combination, thrust, slash, feint. Genuine strike from an unexpected angle. Beautiful technique, refined through what must have been years of dedicated training. Each movement flowed into the next with mechanical perfection. Naruto read the pattern, his sensory abilities tracking her muscle tension to predict strikes before they developed. He dodged, deflected, occasionally redirected her blade with minimal contact. Not counter-attacking yet, just defending, learning her style. You're fast, A's observed, her breathing still controlled. You're good, Naruto returned. Not good enough. She channeled something. Magic. Naruto's senses identified, though different from chakra. Wind gathered around her blade, and her next strike carried enough force to crater the ground where it landed. Naruto had already moved, putting distance between them. Guess we're escalating. Yeah. He didn't activate Sage Mode. Too distinctive, too many questions. Didn't access Nine Tails chakra. But he allowed himself to tap into the conditioning 7 years had ingrained. His speed increased, movements becoming harder to track. When A's attacked next, Naruto met her blade with a kunai that appeared from a storage seal. The clash rang like a bell. They exchanged strikes. Her wind-enhanced rapier against his chakra-reinforced kunai, both fighters pushing harder. A small crowd had gathered, attracted by the sound of high-level combat. Naruto heard whispers. That's the Sword Princess. Who's fighting her? Actually keeping up. A's drove forward with renewed intensity. Her style adapted mid-combat, adjusting to his patterns. Eliminating inefficiencies in real time. She was learning him just as he learned her. Naruto respected that, enough to stop holding back quite so much. The next time A's committed to a thrust, Naruto didn't dodge. He stepped inside her guard, deflected her blade with one hand, and tapped her throat gently with 2 fingers of the other. They froze. First blood would have been mine, Naruto said quietly. If I'd been using a blade. A's looked down at his fingers, then up to his eyes. Something flickered across her expression. Not anger, but interest. Hunger, even. You're stronger, she said. Than me. Different, Naruto corrected, stepping back. You're incredibly skilled. I just have more experience adapting. Teach me. The request caught him off guard. What? How to adapt? A's intensity bordered on desperate. How you do that? Naruto glanced at Loki, who shrugged with theatrical helplessness. Don't look at me. When A's Tan wants to learn something, nothing stops her. I don't really teach, Naruto said slowly. I mostly just do things. Then let me watch you do things. Ace was absolutely serious. In the dungeon, I want to see how you fight. This was getting complicated in ways Naruto hadn't anticipated. Look, I appreciate the interest, but I'm not really looking for a training partner or. Please. The single word, delivered in Ace's soft monotone, somehow carried more weight than a speech. Naruto recognized the drive underneath, the same desperate need to improve he'd carried into the dungeon years ago. I'll think about it, he conceded. Ace nodded, apparently satisfied with that non-answer. I'll find you tomorrow. She walked away with the same unhurried confidence she'd arrived with, leaving Naruto standing in the training ground feeling like he'd just agreed to something significant without fully understanding it. Loki approached, grinning. Well, that was entertaining. You've got skills, Naruto. Real question is, where'd you learn to fight like that? Practice. 7 years of practice in the deep dungeon, if the rumors are right. Loki's eyes narrowed playfully. You're an interesting one. I can see why Freya's curious about that, Naruto said, seizing the opening. What should I expect from this dinner? Loki's expression shifted to something more genuine. Honestly, Freya's gonna try to figure you out. Maybe seduce you, maybe recruit you, maybe just collect you like a pretty trophy. She's been bored lately, and bored Freya is dangerous. Freya. She poked his chest. My advice, be polite, be firm, and don't accept any gifts. Freya's generosity always comes with strings. Noted. And if she makes you an offer you can't refuse, come find me instead. Loki F. Amelia's always looking for talented people, and I promise I'm way more fun than the beauty queen. Her grin returned. Plus, you've already got A's tan interested, which means you basically have an in. Naruto couldn't help but smile. I'll keep that in mind. Loki departed with a wave, leaving Naruto alone in the training ground. The crowd had dispersed, bored once the spectacle ended. Afternoon was sliding toward evening. Toward his appointment with a goddess. Folkvanger made Twilight Manor look modest. The building rose from Orario's northern district like a monument to divine excess, white stone and silver accents. Architecture that managed to be both elegant and imposing. Gardens surrounded it, perfectly maintained, filled with flowers that probably cost more than most people's homes. Otar collected Naruto from the inn precisely at sunset, leading him through Orario's streets in weighted silence. The boar warrior hadn't spoken beyond basic courtesy, but his presence communicated volumes. This is important. Behave accordingly. Disrespect will have consequences. Naruto wore his least damaged clothes and had even attempted to tame his hair, though that was largely futile. He drew stares as they walked, partially because Otar was recognizable, mostly because people sensed something significant happening. Folkvanger's interior matched its exterior, opulent without being gaudy. Every detail precisely calibrated to overwhelm without obvious effort. Servants moved through halls with choreographed efficiency. Art lined the walls, paintings, sculptures, pieces that probably predated Orario itself. Otar led him upstairs, through corridors, finally stopping before massive doors of carved wood. My goddess awaits within. Be respectful. The doors opened. The chamber beyond defied expectations. Naruto had anticipated more opulence, more displays of wealth and power. Instead, the room was almost intimate, a dining table set for two, simple but elegant furnishings, windows open to evening air. Beautiful, but restrained. And at the table, Freya. She was. Naruto struggled for description. Beautiful felt inadequate. She was beauty given form, every element of her appearance calibrated to overwhelm mortal perception. Silver hair cascaded like liquid moonlight. Her dress revealed precisely enough to suggest without being vulgar. Eyes the color of twilight fixed on him with predatory focus. Naruto Uzumaki, she said, and even her voice was crafted, warm honey with underlying steel. How lovely that you accepted my invitation. Please, sit. Naruto sat across from her, maintaining polite distance. Thank you for inviting me, Lady Freya. Just Freya, please. Formality is so tedious between interesting people. She gestured, and servants appeared. The first course, some kind of delicate soup that smelled incredible. I confess, I have been quite curious about you since you emerged from your isolation. So I've heard. Freya's smile held edges. Oh, people have been talking about my interest. How delightful. Orario does love its gossip. She sipped her soup with deliberate grace. Tell me, Naruto, what drives a man to spend 7 years alone in darkness? Direct. Then, Naruto appreciated that more than games. I was looking for something. Did you find it? No. How disappointing. And yet you emerged anyway. What changed? Naruto considered his answer carefully. Freya watched him with the intensity of a cat observing a particularly interesting mouse. I realized I was asking the wrong questions, he said finally. Looking in the wrong place. Fascinating. Freya leaned forward slightly. And what questions are you asking now? Still figuring that out. They ate in measured silence. The food was exceptional. RSE after course of culinary artistry Naruto barely tasted, his attention focused on reading Freya's intentions. She seemed content to simply observe him, occasionally asking innocuous questions about his surface experiences. After the 5th course, she shifted tactics. I can see souls, Freya announced casually. It is my gift and my curse. The divine sight that perceives the truth of mortals beneath their flesh and facade. That sounds intrusive, Naruto said. Freya laughed, genuine amusement lighting her features. Oh, I like you. Yes, it is intrusive. Also unavoidable. I see every soul in Orario constantly, their light, their darkness, their essential nature. Her expression turned serious. But yours is different. Different how? You contain contradictions. Light and shadow in perfect balance. Neither consuming the other. Pain and hope twisted together into something new. You exist as if you are several people simultaneously, yet remain singular. Freya's eyes bore into him. In millennia of observation, I have never seen a soul like yours. Naruto met her gaze evenly. And that's why you invited me. Scientific curiosity. Partially. Freya stood, moving around the table with liquid grace. But also because beautiful things should be preserved, cherished, possessed. There it was. The truth beneath courtesy. I'm not a thing to be possessed, Naruto said quietly. Everything can be possessed if one offers sufficient inducement. Freya stopped beside him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something floral and expensive. What do you want, Naruto? Money. I have wealth beyond measure. Power. I command Orario's strongest familia. Knowledge. My libraries contain secrets from ages past. Name your desire, and I shall provide it. Naruto looked up at her. What if I don't want anything you can provide? Freya's smile froze. For just a moment, her perfect composure cracked, revealing something underneath. Surprise, perhaps, or anger. Then it smoothed over. Everyone wants something, she said. I want to figure out how to be around people again, Naruto said honestly. How to have friends and connections that aren't about using each other. I want to feel like I belong somewhere, not because I'm powerful or useful, but because I'm me. He stood, facing her directly. You can't buy that, can't command it. It either exists or it doesn't. Silence stretched between them. You are rejecting me, Freya said slowly, as if testing unfamiliar words. You truly have no interest in what I offer. I appreciate the dinner and the conversation. But yeah, I'm not interested in being collected. Freya stared at him for a long moment. Then she did something Naruto didn't expect. She laughed. Not polite amusement but genuine, almost delighted laughter. Remarkable, she said. Do you know how long it has been since someone refused me? Since I could not predict or manipulate their response. Her eyes gleamed. You have made yourself infinitely more interesting. Naruto Uzumaki. That sounded dangerous. Naruto took a step back. Look, I don't want trouble. Oh, but trouble has found you regardless. Freya's smile was sharp now, predatory. I will have you, one way or another, not through force or coercion, those are crude methods. But through genuine connection, perhaps. Through proving myself worthy of that soul. She moved closer. You want authenticity. Very well, I shall be authentic. I am lonely, Naruto. Eternally, existentially lonely. No mortal truly sees me. They see the beauty, the power, the goddess. They worship or fear or desire. But they do not see Freya. The raw honesty caught him off guard. You, though, she reached out, fingers stopping just short of touching his face. You look past all that. You see a person extending an invitation and evaluate it on its own merits. Do you understand how rare that is? I see someone who's used to getting their way, Naruto said carefully, and doesn't know how to handle being told no. Freya's hand dropped. Perhaps, but I am also someone willing to learn. She stepped back, composure returning. Thank you for the evening, Naruto. It has been enlightening. That's it. Naruto hadn't expected to be dismissed. For now, I do not give up easily, but neither am I foolish enough to push when pushing will only drive you away. Freya's smile turned almost soft. I shall earn your interest properly. And in the meantime, you have given me something I have not had in centuries. What's that? Uncertainty. Her eyes glowed with something that might have been joy or might have been obsession. I have no idea what you will do next. It is delicious. Otar appeared at the door, summoned by some signal Naruto hadn't noticed. I will escort you home, Mr. Uzumaki. The dismissal was clear. Naruto left with more questions than answers, feeling like he'd just dodged something dangerous while simultaneously ensuring it would pursue him further. The dungeon welcomed him like an old lover. After the intensity of Freya's attention, the political maneuvering, the constant social navigation, Naruto needed simplicity. Needed the straightforward equations of combat and survival. He descended alone, past the upper floors where adventurers clustered, into the depths that thinned the crowds. Floor 30, 40, 45. Here, the dungeon's character changed. The walls bore marks of intentional architecture, too regular to be natural, patterns suggesting purpose. Naruto had spent months examining these anomalies during his initial explorations. The monsters at this depth didn't spawn in random encounters. They hunted with intelligence, coordinated tactics that spoke to something directing them. A black rhino charged from a side passage, its armored hide gleaming in the bioluminescent light. Naruto met the charge head-on. At the last second, he sidestepped, flowing around the monster's momentum like water. His hand, glowing with concentrated chakra, drove a Rasengan into the rhino's flank. The rotating sphere of energy burrowed through armor and flesh with surgical precision. The monster collapsed, already dissolving into ash and leaving its core behind. More came. An almirage, rabbit-like creature with a horn capable of piercing steel. Naruto caught its leap midair, redirected its momentum into the wall with enough force to stun, and finished it with a chakra-enhanced strike. A pack of deadly hornets swarmed from ceiling vents. Naruto's hands blurred through seals. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 5 perfect duplicates appeared in puffs of smoke, each moving independently to engage the swarm. The clones fought with his full skill, coordinating without verbal communication because they shared his mind. Within seconds, the hornets were eliminated. Naruto dismissed the clones, absorbing their combat experiences. This was what he was good at. What made sense. Identify threat, eliminate threat, advance. Simple. He descended further. Floor 47 brought irregular enemies, monsters that had mutated from their base forms, developing unexpected abilities. A moss huge lunged with vines that moved too fast for its species, suggesting evolution or intentional modification. Naruto activated Sage Mode partially, just enough to enhance perception without the full transformation. The world sharpened. He could feel the dungeon's breath around him, sense the flow of energy through walls and floor, detect spawning monsters before they manifested. The moss huge didn't stand a chance. Naruto dismantled it with clinical efficiency. But something was wrong. His enhanced senses detected an anomaly, a chamber that shouldn't exist according to the dungeon's mapped structure. A space carved into the bedrock with geometric precision, hidden behind what appeared to be solid wall. Naruto approached the wall, running chakra-enhanced fingers along its surface. Found the seam, the slight variation in density. Pushed. The wall section rotated inward, revealing a passage. Beyond lay a room that predated Babel, perhaps predated Orario itself. The architecture was fundamentally different from the dungeon's organic structure. Carved stone with symbols that hurt to look at directly, a central pedestal holding something crystalline. Naruto stepped inside carefully, every sense alert for traps. The crystal on the pedestal pulsed with familiar energy. Similar to his chakra, but older. More refined. It called to him with the same voice the deeper dungeon used, promising understanding. He reached out, fingers stopping just short of contact. "What are you?" The crystal pulsed brighter. Naruto's vision blurred, overlaid with images. A city of impossible size, technology and magic intertwined. People who looked almost human but weren't quite. The same city burning, massive creatures tearing through its defenses, people screaming. A man with eyes like Naruto's, standing before this very crystal. Speaking words in a language Naruto somehow understood. "Seal it here. Let the dungeon be its prison and its redemption." The vision shattered. Naruto jerked back, breathing hard. What was that? A recording? A memory? The crystal still pulsed, waiting. He didn't touch it, didn't know enough to risk interaction. But he memorized its location, the symbols surrounding it, every detail his enhanced perception could capture. This was important, connected to his presence here, to the dungeon's nature, to secrets Orario had forgotten or never known. Naruto left the hidden chamber, sealing the entrance behind him. His mind raced with implications. The dungeon wasn't just a monster-spawning labyrinth. It was a prison, or a seal, housing something that ancient civilization had fought and contained. And somehow, Naruto was connected to it. Freya watched through her mirror, a divine artifact that showed her whatever soul she focused on. Currently, Naruto, standing in a chamber she hadn't known existed. Touching mysteries that made even her uneasy. That soul, she whispered to the empty room. That impossible, magnificent soul. She needed him, needed to possess him, understand him, own him. The need burned with intensity she hadn't felt in millennia. Freya was bored no longer. Now she was obsessed. In Twilight Manor, Ace sat cleaning her sword, replaying the afternoon's spar in her mind. His movements, his adaptation, his strength. She wanted to fight him again. Learn from him. Grow stronger. "Riveria," she said to the high elf reading nearby, "I need to get stronger." "You're already Orario's finest swordsman, Ace." Not enough. Ace's grip on her blade tightened. He was stronger. Riveria looked up, recognizing the determination in her charge's eyes. The man from today. Yes. Need to fight him again. That could be arranged, Riveria said carefully, though privately she wondered if encouraging Ace's new fixation was wise. Deep below, the dungeon breathed. And waited. And planned. Chapter 3 and Chapter 4, The Sword Princess and the Sage's Path. Ace Wallenstein did not dream often. When she did, the content never varied, flames consuming everything. Her mother's voice singing a lullaby that became a scream, a dragon's eye reflecting her child self's helplessness. She would wake with desperate on her lips, the wind agic responding to her emotional state by making her hair float weightlessly for seconds before subsiding. Tonight offered something different. She dreamed of movement. Not hers, but his. That blonde man with the strange marks. Flowing around her blade like he existed slightly out of phase with reality. Every attack she'd thrown, he'd answered. Not with superior speed or strength, though he possessed both, but with understanding. He'd read her intentions through microscopic tells she didn't know she telegraphed. In the dream, they fought endlessly, and with each exchange, she grew sharper. Better. Closer to the strength she needed. Ace woke before dawn with clarity. She would find him today. Would convince him to let her watch, learn, improve. The alternative, remaining at her current place. Ada while the one-eyed black dragon existed somewhere beyond her reach, was unacceptable. She dressed in efficient silence, strapped desperate to her hip, and left Twilight Manor before the rest of her familia stirred. Orario's pre-dawn streets were nearly empty save for bakers starting ovens and adventurers who preferred early dungeon runs to avoid crowds. Finding Naruto proved easier than anticipated. Her instincts, honed through countless hunts, led her to the dungeon entrance just as he emerged from Babel's interior. He looked different than yesterday. Less uncertain, more centered. Like he'd resolved something internal. His clothes remained worn, but he'd acquired new weapons. She spotted kunai holstered at his thigh, sealed scrolls strapped to his forearm. Prepared for serious delving, their eyes met across the plaza. Recognition flashed across his face, followed by resignation. "You're persistent," he called. Ace crossed the distance between them. "You said you'd think about it." I did think about it. He smiled slightly. The answer's still no. Why? Because I work alone. Always have. Ace considered this. Direct approach wasn't working. She adjusted tactics. Scared I'll slow you down. His eyebrow rose. That's not going to work. What isn't? Challenging my ego to manipulate me into agreeing. I spent 7 years alone, remember? I don't need to prove anything. Frustrating. Ace tried another angle. I want to get stronger. You're stronger than me. Logical to learn from you. There are plenty of strong adventurers in Orario. None stronger than me, except you. She met his gaze directly. Please. Naruto studied her for a long moment. Ace kept her expression neutral, but something in her intensity must have communicated her desperation because his resistance visibly wavered. One trip, he said finally. You keep up, stay quiet, and don't question my methods. If you slow me down or cause problems, you leave immediately. Understood, understood. And if anyone asks, this never happened. I don't need more people deciding I'm a training resource. Ace nodded agreement. Relief and anticipation coiled in her chest. Naruto sighed. Floor 45. Hope you've eaten breakfast. The upper dungeon was an entirely different ecosystem than the depths. Floors 1 through 12 teamed with low-level adventurers, new recruits. TS testing themselves against goblins and kobolds, supporters hauling equipment, the organized chaos of Orario's entry-level grinding. Naruto moved through it like smoke, avoiding encounters through positioning and timing rather than speed. Ace followed, noting his route choices. You're avoiding people, she observed. Fewer questions that way. He slipped past a party engaged with war shadows without them noticing his passage. Plus, watching people fight up here is depressing. Why? They're terrified. Most of them. Going through motions they learned in training, hoping the dungeon doesn't deviate from the manual. He glanced back at her. You were never like that, were you? Even as a beginner. It wasn't a question. Ace answered anyway. No, I was impatient. Still are. She couldn't argue. Floor 13 marked a transition. The architecture shifted from worked stone to more organic structures, tunnels that looked partially digested. Fewer adventurers. Those present ed with professional competence rather than fearful determination. Naruto's pace increased. Ace matched him easily, her stats allowing sustained high-speed movement. They descended through floors in rapid succession. 18, 22, 27. The monster spawns grew more frequent and aggressive, but Naruto seemed to predict their emergence locations, adjusting his route to avoid or ambush as efficiency dictated. On floor 30, he stopped. This is where it gets interesting, he said. Everything above 30 is the dungeon showing restraint. Below, it actually tries to kill you. As if summoned by his words. The wall beside them erupted. A battle boar, 2 meters of muscle, tusk, and rage, charged with enough momentum to pulverize stone. Naruto didn't move until the last possible instant. Then he twisted, letting the boar's tusk pass through the space his torso had occupied, and drove his palm into the creature's skull. Concentrated energy, not magic, Ace's senses determined. Something else detonated inside the boar's brain. It collapsed mid-charge, dead before momentum finished carrying it forward. Rasengan, Naruto said, noting her stare. Rotational energy compressed into a single point. Bypasses external defenses. Ace filed that away. Teach me. It's not something you can teach. Requires a specific energy type. Your magic. My complication. He started moving again. Come on. The real descent starts here. Floors 30 through 40 were where Orario's elite proved themselves. The monsters spawned in coordinated packs, demonstrated tactical awareness, and exploited environmental advantages. Adventurers who made it this deep were either high-level veterans or about to become cautionary tales. Naruto moved through it like he was reading a script. When Almiraj ambushed from ceiling vents, he'd already shifted position. When a war tiger stalked them using camouflage abilities, he'd smile and redirect Ace's path to flank it. The combat was NT avoidance. He engaged regularly, but every fight was on his terms. Ace watched him work with consuming focus. His fighting style resisted categorization. No formal technique, no school of combat she recognized. Instead, he fought like water, taking the shape required by circumstances, flowing around opposition, crashing down with overwhelming force when necessary. On floor 33, a pack of mad beetles tried to swarm them. Naruto's hands blurred through gestures Ace didn't recognize. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 20 copies of him exploded into existence, each moving independently to engage the swarm. Ace stared. Clones weren't unprecedented. Some rare magics allowed temporary duplicates. But these moved with autonomous intelligence, coordinated without communication, and fought with his full skill. The beetles were eliminated in seconds. The clones dispersed in puffs of smoke. What was that? Ace demanded. Shadow clone technique. Creates solid duplicates that share my consciousness. He noticed her expression. You want to learn that too, don't you? Yes. Naruto's smile held understanding. Can't teach it. Requires absurd energy reserves most people don't have. I've got. He paused, searching for words. An unfair advantage in that department. Frustrating, but Ace accepted it. Not everything could be learned through determination alone. They descended further. Floor 40 brought dungeon lizards, intelligent predators that hunted in coordinated packs. Naruto engaged them with Ace, their first genuine collaboration. His fighting style complemented hers unexpectedly. Where she relied on refined technique and wind-enhanced speed, he offered unpredictable angles and overwhelming force. When a lizard dodged her thrust, Naruto was already there with a follow-up strike. When he overcommitted to punish an opening, she covered his recovery. The synergy developed naturally, both fighters adapting to each other's rhythms. You're good at this, Naruto commented after they'd cleared the pack. So are you. I meant fighting with a partner. Most people at your level are used to fighting alone or leading. You actually adjust for my presence. Ace considered this. Low-key familia does cooperative training. I'm used to working with others. It's more than that. You read my intentions and build on them. That's rare. The observation pleased her more than it should. Ace filed the feeling away for later examination. Floor 45 arrived with a shift in atmospheric pressure. The air grew heavier, saturated with intent that made Ace's combat instincts scream warnings. Naruto stopped, head tilting. Something's wrong, he said. How do you know? The dungeon's breathing changed. Ace wanted to ask how he could possibly detect that, but movement ahead cut off the question. The floor boss, a Goliath that shouldn't spawn for another week according to guild predictions, tore through the wall. 4 meters of animated stone and malice. Regenerating from damage almost instantly, strength capable of liquefying adventurers with glancing blows. But this Goliath was wrong. Its stone skin bore crystalline growths that pulsed with the energy Ace had felt from corrupted monsters. Its eyes burned with intelligence no floor boss should possess. And when it roared, the sound carried words in a language that predated human settlement. Irregular, Naruto breathed, heavily mutated. This thing's at least twice normal strength. The Goliath charged. Naruto moved first, intercepting to give Ace positioning. The impact of his block against the Goliath's fist created a shockwave that cracked the surrounding walls. Ace used the distraction to circle, looking for weak points. Standard strategy against Goliath's targeted joints and the regeneration core in their chest. But the crystalline growths made weak points harder to identify. Ace, Naruto called. Wind magic on my signal. She didn't question, just gathered power. Awaken, Tempest. Wind coalesced around Desperate, the familiar rush of magic responding to her will. Naruto engaged the Goliath in close combat, trading blows that would have killed lesser fighters. He was hurting it, Ace realized. Positioning it precisely. Now, Ace struck. Desperate, wind enhanced to cutting pressure that could slice steel, drove into the Goliath's chest where Naruto had created a hairline crack in its crystalline armor. The blade punched through, found the core, and shattered it. The Goliath stumbled, started regenerating. Too fast. The crystalline growths pulsed, rating its healing beyond normal parameters. It's adapting, Naruto said. Plan B. He changed. Golden energy erupted around him. Not magic, Ace's senses insisted, something fundamentally different. His eyes shifted, pupils becoming slitted, the whisker marks on his face darkening. The presence he radiated intensified until the air itself seemed to vibrate. Nine-Tails chakra mode, though Ace had no name for it. Naruto became a golden blur. His speed increased beyond her ability to track clearly, his strikes carrying exponentially more force. He hit the regenerating Goliath like a meteor, drove it backward through 3 stone walls, and before it could recover, his hand formed that rotating sphere of energy, except massive this time, the size of his torso. Odama Rasengan. The technique. Yui detonated against the Goliath's core with enough force to vaporize the surrounding stone. The floor boss didn't just die, it ceased to exist beyond its drop crystal and a rapidly expanding cloud of ash. The golden energy faded. Naruto stood in the crater he'd created, breathing slightly harder but otherwise unfazed. Aiz approached slowly. What was that? That, Naruto said, was me not holding back. The energy. Not magic. No, something else. He met her eyes. Something I don't fully understand myself. The honesty surprised her. Most people would deflect, claim proprietary techniques, maintain mystique. Naruto just admitted ignorance. It's beautiful, Aiz said. His laugh was unexpected. Beautiful. It's basically controlled rage given form. Still beautiful. Pure. Honest. She struggled for words. Like watching a storm. Something shifted in his expression. That's probably the nicest thing anyone said about it. They stood in the aftermath, both processing the fight. Aiz's mind raced with observations, cataloging his techniques, analyzing applications. But underneath the tactical assessment, something else stirred. She'd been chasing strength her entire life. Training obsessively, pushing herself beyond reasonable limits, all to reach a level where she could face the dragon that killed her mother. She'd measured herself against Orario's finest and found herself superior to all but a handful. Then Naruto appeared, stronger than her, faster, more skilled, and instead of feeling defeated or envious, she felt inspired. Again, she said. Naruto blinked. What? I want to fight like that. Show me again. Aiz. That was an emergency response to a mutated floor boss. Not exactly something to practice casually. Then find another emergency. She knew she sounded unreasonable but couldn't stop. Or spar with me. I need to understand how you move like that. Naruto studied her with disturbing perception. It's not about the techniques, is it? You're chasing something. Strength. Why? The question was simple. The answer was everything. Aiz hesitated, old habits of emotional suppression warring with sudden desire to be understood. Revenge, she said finally. The one-eyed black dragon killed my mother. I'll kill it. Ah, Naruto's expression shifted to something painfully understanding. You're me 7 years ago. What? Chasing an answer through power. Thinking if you just get strong enough, push hard enough, the thing driving you will finally be satisfied. He shook his head. It doesn't work that way. Aiz bristled. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. His tone was gentle but firm. You've built your entire identity around this goal. Training, fighting, growing stronger, it's all to reach a moment where you face that dragon and make it pay for what it took from you. Except you've already realized something you won't admit. What? That even if you kill it, even if you're strong enough to carve it into pieces and scatter its remains across the continent, you still won't have your mother back. The hole won't fill. You'll just be empty and strong instead of empty and weak. The words hit like physical blows. Aiz wanted to argue, to deny, to claim he was wrong. But something in her, the part she'd been suppressing for years, whispered that he was right. Then what do I do? The question escaped before she could stop it, vulnerability she never showed bleeding through. Naruto's smile was sad and kind simultaneously. You find something to fight for, not just against. Build a life that matters beyond revenge. Connect with people who see you as more than a weapon. He gestured at the destroyed chamber. Strength is important, but it's not enough by itself. Aiz processed this. The concept felt foreign. Her entire life had been structured around singular purpose. Grow strong, kill the dragon, avenge her mother. Everything else, her familia, her friendships, her few interests, existed peripherally to that central goal. I don't know how, she admitted quietly. Neither do I, Naruto said. Still figuring it out myself. But maybe we can work on it together. The offer resonated in ways Aiz didn't fully understand. She nodded. They continued descending. The conversation had shifted something between them. No longer stranger and curiosity, but two people recognizing shared struggle. Floor 50 brought new challenges. The monsters here were uniformly deadly, requiring genuine coordination to survive. Naruto and Aiz fell into combat rhythm, their earlier energy deepening as they spent hours fighting side by side. Aiz began understanding his fighting philosophy. He didn't just react to threats, he orchestrated engagement terms. Every movement served multiple purposes. Evasion that positioned for counterattack, blocks that redirected momentum into environmental advantages, strikes that controlled spacing. You fight like you're playing chess, she observed during a brief rest. More like jazz, Naruto corrected. Chess is predetermined strategies. This is improvisation within structured patterns. React to the moment while maintaining overall theme. The distinction fascinated her. Aiz's training emphasized refinement, perfecting specific techniques until they became instinctive. Naruto operated inversely, mastering principles that allowed infinite variation. Can you teach that? She asked. Already am. You've adjusted your style 3 times since we started. Incorporated elements of my spacing, my timing. You learn by doing, not by instruction. Aiz hadn't consciously noticed, but he was right. Her movements had shifted subtly, borrowing concepts from watching him operate. Floor 55 presented ancient architecture. The orched stone walls bore carvings similar to what Naruto had found in the hidden chamber, depicting scenes of a civilization fighting massive creatures. Aiz ran her fingers over the symbols. What is this place? Proof that something came before Orario. Before the gods descended. Before recorded history. Naruto examined a particularly detailed carving showing humans wielding energy similar to his golden form. I think the dungeon isn't natural. It was built, or sealed, or both. The guild claims it's a natural phenomenon. The guild's wrong. He pointed to specific symbols. This is intentional architecture. A prison or a weapon or something else entirely. But definitely created. They explored the ancient level carefully. Aiz noted everything, committing details to memory for later reporting to Loki Familia. The carvings told a story. Advanced civilization, catastrophic war, desperate sealing ritual, aftermath of survivors building on ruins. If this is true, Aiz said slowly, then everything we know about the dungeon is wrong. Probably. You don't seem concerned. I've got bigger problems than historical revisionism. Naruto's tone was light, but his expression suggested weight behind the words. They reached floor 59 as afternoon outside transitioned to evening. The deepest level Aiz had personally explored, though Loki Familia's records indicated her executives had reached 62. The monsters here were fundamentally different, not just stronger, but operating with coordination suggesting centralized intelligence. They ambushed in patterns, exploited terrain, adapted tactics mid-combat. The dungeons awake this deep, Naruto explained. Actively hostile instead of passively dangerous. Fighting through it pushed even Aiz's considerable abilities. She burned through magic reserves, relied on Desperate's enhancement more heavily, took risks she'd normally avoid. Naruto covered her consistently, his seemingly inexhaustible energy providing security to push her limits. In a chamber filled with violas, plant monsters with acidic attacks and regenerative abilities, Aiz found herself surrounded. Her wind magic was depleted, Desperate's edge dulled from overuse. Fatigue making her movements a fraction slower. Naruto appeared in the center of the swarm. Not through speed, through teleportation, a technique she hadn't seen him use. Dozens of shadow clones exploded outward, each engaging a viola simultaneously while the original grabbed her. Hold on, he said. Golden energy enveloped them both. The world blurred. When it resolved, they stood outside the swarm's range. Naruto already dismissing his clones and engaging the now confused violas from an advantageous position. Aiz watched him dismantle the threat with clinical efficiency. His movements were economy itself. No wasted motion, every action serving purpose. Beautiful in its functionality. The realization hit her suddenly. She was attracted to him. Not romantically, or not purely romantically. The feeling was more complex. Admiration for his strength, appreciation for his philosophy, gratitude for his instruction, fascination with his mysteries. It coalesced into wanting to be near him, to learn from him, to understand him. When had that happened? When had he shifted from curiosity to importance? The violas eliminated, Naruto returned. You okay? Yes. Thank you. He studied her face. You're thinking hard about something. Aiz hesitated. Emotional honesty didn't come naturally to her. But his earlier vulnerability about not understanding his own power had created space for reciprocation. I like fighting with you, she said. You mentioned that. No, I mean, she struggled for words. I've fought beside my familia for years. Trained with the best instructors money can hire. None of it felt like this. Like what? Like growing. Like every moment teaches me something new. She met his eyes. I don't want this to be one trip. I want to keep doing this. Naruto's expression cycled through surprise, consideration, and something that might have been pleasure. That sounds suspiciously like asking to be friends. Is it? Yeah, it is. Ace processed this. Then yes, I'm asking to be friends. His smile was warm. Okay. Friends who sometimes delve the dungeon together and fight monsters. I can work with that. Relief and satisfaction mingled in Ace's chest. She'd made a friend. Through her own initiative, her own vulnerability. Not assigned by familia membership or circumstantial cooperation, but genuine connection. It felt significant. They ascended as evening deepened toward night. The return journey was faster. Naruto knew shortcuts and safe passages that cut hours from the climb. They emerged from Babel into Orario's evening bustle, both showing signs of the day's intensity. Thank you, Ace said as they prepared to part. For letting me come. For teaching me. You earned it by keeping up. Naruto's respect seemed genuine. Not many people could handle that pace. Will you do it again? Tomorrow. He laughed. I need to recover too, you know. How about 3 days from now? Same time, same entrance. Ace nodded, committing it to memory. 3 days. I'll prepare. She headed toward Twilight Manor, mind already cataloging the day's lessons. Behind her, she felt Naruto's presence disappear into Orario's crowds. Riveria was waiting when Ace entered the manor. The high elf sat in the common room with tea and a book, but her posture suggested the reading was pretense. She looked up as Ace entered. You were gone all day, Riveria observed. Training. With. Ace hesitated. She'd promised not to mention it, but Riveria was her mentor. The trust went deep. Naruto Uzumaki. The man from yesterday. Riveria's expression shifted to concern. Ace. That's potentially dangerous. We know almost nothing about him. I know he's strong, and kind, and understands things I'm struggling with. Ace sat across from her mentor. He's like me, chasing something through combat, but he's further along in understanding it's not enough. And you think he can teach you that understanding? I think he can help me find it myself. Riveria studied her for a long moment. You like him? It wasn't a question. Ace nodded anyway. As a friend, or more. Ace considered honestly. I don't know yet. Both. Maybe. Does it matter? It matters if it distracts you from your goals. It doesn't. It clarifies them. Ace leaned forward. He said revenge isn't enough. That I need to fight for something, not just against. He's right, Riveria. I've known it for a while but couldn't articulate it. The high elf's concern softened into understanding. Then perhaps this connection is valuable. But be careful, Ace. People who understand our pain can hurt us more deeply than enemies. I know. Ace stood. But I'm going to risk it anyway. In her room, Ace cleaned desperate with meditative focus. The blade had served her well today, and proper maintenance showed respect for tools. As she worked, her mind wandered through the day's events. Naruto's golden form, his rotating sphere technique, the way he moved like water. The gentleness in his voice when discussing her revenge. The warmth of his smile when agreeing to friendship. She wanted to fight beside him again. Learn from him. Understand what drove him. Help him with whatever he was chasing, just as he'd offered to help her. 3 days felt too long. Across the city, in a church that had seen better days, Hestia sensed a disturbance in the force. Not literally. She wasn't that kind of goddess. But divine intuition whispered warnings that her almost friend, her potential first familia member, her blonde adventurer with the sad eyes and impossible status, was attracting attention from other quarters. Not on my watch, she muttered, pulling out paper to plan her next move. If Naruto thought he could Saint befriend every goddess and beautiful adventurer in Orario without Hestia securing her claim, he had another thing coming. Operation. Actually recruit Naruto for real this time was officially underway. And in the dungeon's depths, in chambers no mortal had reached in millennia, something stirred. The seal trembled. Ancient mechanisms engaged. A consciousness vast and terrible focused its attention upward, toward the surface. Toward the soul that resonated with its prison. Soon. Chapter 4 End. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.